To the rest of the world, she was the absolute picture of perfection. A noble young lady, endlessly refined and overflowing with dignity. Yet, the very first time she crossed paths with her new instructor, her true, rotten colors showed. She arrogantly commanded him to clean the filth right off her boots. But this teacher was no ordinary servant. Instead of obeying, he raised his hand and delivered a ruthless, resounding slap right across her beautiful face. You see, before stepping foot into this grand estate, Derrick had already secured absolute authority. Diela's own father had given him absolute, unquestionable permission to discipline her using whatever brutal methods he deemed necessary. But the real shocker behind why Derrick held such heaven-defying power came from a rather ironic source. His past identity as a mere street rat. The truth was, Derrick was actually a soul from another world. A transmigrator who had awakened in this strange new reality, only to face the harsh and utterly devastating truth of his reincarnation. He had not been reborn as a glorious prince or a chosen hero. He was reduced to a filthy beggar fighting to survive the slums. Even the mentor who introduced him to the arcane arts was nothing but a washed-up, homeless old man who loved to brag about his so-called glorious past. This geezer was no hidden grandmaster operating in the shadows. He was just a pathetic, low-level one-star mage struggling to get by. But the old beggar desperately craved an audience to worship him, and Derrick desperately needed to unlock the secrets of magic. It was a flawless transaction of mutual desperation and survival. However, Derrick was a monster in disguise. In just one single year, he shattered common sense and reached a realm of magical prowess that the old man had failed to touch in his entire miserable existence. But instead of being proud, the old man grew bitter with boiling envy. He tried to crush Derrick's spirit, poisoning his mind by claiming his potential was capped. He spat out that 2-star magic was his absolute ceiling. The old man claimed that lowly commoner blood was a curse that could never be broken. He insisted that no matter how fiercely he struggled against his fate, it was all utterly pointless, and he wasn't entirely wrong. In this twisted world, noble mages held godlike privileges that the lower class could only dream of. Even a talentless noble brat could effortlessly ascend to become a mighty 3-star mage before they even reached the age of adulthood. The sheer injustice of this society was sickening to the core. The night of that bitter argument felt like an agonizing eternity. Derrick tossed and turned, unable to decipher if the old man was genuinely warning him about the unforgiving cruelty of the world, or simply projecting his own pathetic failures. But when dawn broke, a horrifying sight awaited him. Derrick stumbled upon the cold, lifeless corpse of his master. The body was brutally battered, completely covered in devastating, gruesome wounds battered from head to toe. At first, Derrick assumed the old man had just been beaten, after getting dragged into some street brawl, but the brutal truth soon came to light. The old beggar was mercilessly beaten to death by the guards. His crime? He was caught red-handed, stealing a 2-star magical artifact straight from the heavily guarded storehouse. No one could understand why a mere beggar, cursed by fate to never even grasp 2-star magic, would throw away his own life for such a treasure. Years passed since the tragic death of the old beggar, and fate led Derrick to his second magical mentor, a woman named Katya. She was the fierce matriarch of the fallen Flamert family, a formidable 3-star mage who carved out a bloody living as a mercenary. At first, she simply offered a bit of guidance to a reckless boy who had joined the mercenary life way too early, yet somehow already possessed the innate ability to cast 1-star spells. Katya ended up teaching Derrick invaluable lessons, not just about wielding magic, but about surviving in this cruel, unforgiving world. But what truly shifted her entire perspective was a shocking, unforeseen incident. The very day Derrick accidentally revealed his monstrous talent, Katya wasted zero time and dragged him straight into a completely isolated forest clearing. You know exactly how insanely sensitive the arrogant nobles are when it comes to their precious privileges. And monopolizing magic is the absolute greatest of them all. True power is celebrated as a divine blessing, but only if you are born into nobility. For lowly commoners, It is a death sentence. Even becoming a 3-star mage usually demands every single drop of blood and sweat from a whole lifetime entirely devoted to magic. And yet, what you just casually activated was a high-tier 2-star distortion spell, the terrifying technique known as auditory hallucination. From that heart-stopping moment on, Katia began traveling the world with Derrick, secretly passing down various forbidden spells to him every now and then. She would also share bittersweet stories about the high-class social circles she used to effortlessly dominate, back when she was still a respected noble. After one full year of living life on the edge like this, Katia quietly left the estate of Count Elf, leaving behind nothing but a rare 2-star magical artifact. She vanished into thin air like a phantom, completely vanished from Derrick's world. With the past behind him, Derrick pushed his limits, independently mastering 2 entirely new 2-star spells. Within that very year, at just 16 years old, his magical growth was terrifying, and he refused to slow down. Yet, on that exact same day, an unexpected message arrived, carrying a commission that would completely rewrite his destiny. He was being scouted as an exclusive private tutor by a monstrously powerful lord from the borderlands, an absolute titan of society whom not even the highest-ranking class nobility in the royal capital dared to cross. For a rising talent like Derrick, this was an offer too dangerous, yet too tempting to refuse. Securing a position as the personal magic instructor for such elite bloodlines was a miracle most wizards would quite literally kill for. The shadow pulling the strings behind this royal request was none other than the infamous Duke Duplin, a man notorious for throwing vast fortunes away like worthless dirt, and constantly issuing massive, bloody subjugation orders to wipe out the monster hordes plaguing his domain. But Derrick's sharp survival instincts immediately flared up. Something about this grand quest smelled deeply rotten. An aristocratic powerhouse like the mighty Duplin family had absolutely zero reason to hire lowly mercenaries for a simple hunt. The chilling, ominous warnings from both the old beggar and Katia echoed in his mind, making him extremely cautious. His first instinct was to reject the terrifying proposal outright. But the Duplin estate countered with a mountain of overwhelming wealth. Just the upfront signing bonus alone was a staggering fortune, paid out in a pure, gleaming gold coin. The official target was listed as a pathetic pack of common goblins, but exactly as Derrick's brilliant mind had already deduced, this supposed monster subjugation was nothing but a clever smokescreen. The true, hidden objective behind all this elaborate secrecy was to secure a top-tier magic tutor for the prized daughter of the mighty Duke himself. The 3 mysterious figures who had approached him earlier were far from ordinary messengers. The stern old man was Delin, the absolute master and head butler of the Grand Duplin estate. The sharp-eyed woman was Katerina, the fearsome head maid, who ruled the mansion's shadows. And that final, striking figure was none other than Aileen, the eldest daughter and heir of the legendary Duplin bloodline. The staggering payout convinced Derrick to sign the contract, but his guard remained absolutely raised. High-ranking nobles. That was the true reason for hiring a former mercenary to act as a private tutor. Meanwhile, the young Lord Ray violently threw open the heavy doors, storming into Duke Duplin's private study. "Father, Brother Balafian, you have to see the absolute madness unfolding right now. Ray, have you completely lost your mind? Did I not raise you to maintain absolute aristocratic composure at all times? I am not the one losing my grip on reality, Father. It is Diella. She has already started violently attacking the household staff. Keep your voice down, Ray. Can you not see our father is speaking with me right now? But brother, in just the last month alone, over 10 servants have fled the estate because they feared for their lives. She shatters priceless furniture just for the fun of it. Father, how much longer are you going to tolerate this unhinged ticking time bomb?" Hearing this blatant disrespect, Balafian, the eldest heir of the family, finally lost his patience. "That is quite enough. Get out of our sight. I still have critical matters to discuss with our father." "But father, you must admit that Diella is completely beyond salvation. We still have Aisling to uphold the family honor. I truly believe it is finally time we cut Diella loose forever." Listen to me very carefully, Ray. That is absolutely not. The final decision was out of her hands. I had already instructed the head butler to investigate that wretched monastery. Their purification facilities are immaculate, and countless high-ranking nobles send their problematic children there to be disciplined. Rather than letting her remain a cursed burden on our noble house, it would be far wiser to surrender her wretched fate to the heavens. If we let this madness continue unchecked, a lunatic like her will forever leave a disgusting stain on our flawless bloodline. But the very second Ray finished his arrogant speech, the terrifying Duke Duplin lunged forward, grabbed him by the hair, and violently smashed his face into the solid mahogany desk. I told you once before, you are not the one calling the shots here. Meanwhile, the graceful ace line had already escorted Derrick deep into the heart of the ducal estate. Tell me, Derrick, have you heard any dark rumors regarding my sister, Diella? Honestly, I have only ever seen her name recorded in the official family lineage documents. Derrick thought to himself. Iceline let out a soft sigh, claiming that made perfect sense. Diella was kept hidden in the shadows, drawing absolutely no attention from the outside world whatsoever. In Hevermunch, at that exact moment, their paths collided with Belefrian and Rick, who were just stepping out of the Duke's study. It has been far too long, Iceline. How have you been? I appreciate your concern, brother. I am perfectly fine. We are leaving. As you can plainly see, Rick has sustained injuries. We will speak another time. The heavy tension in the air and the dark looks on their faces made it blatantly obvious that a fierce dispute had just torn through the estate. When Derrick caught sight of a trembling maid at the end of the hall, desperately covering her tear-stained face, the missing pieces clicked into place. He knew exactly what had transpired. Without another word, the two of them stepped into the imposing office of Duke Duplin. Iceline gracefully exchanged the standard noble pleasantries with her father, before getting straight to the point. Father, please meet the magic tutor I personally escorted from Elbestum. He has stepped forward to instruct Diella. However, one glance at the Duke's dismissive expression made it painfully clear that he viewed this entire arrangement as an absolute joke. Father, you must be swamped with work. I shall take my leave. But just as she turned to exit, the Duke's booming voice anchored Derrick to the spot. You look awfully young. Are you merely 16 years of age this year? Yes, Your Grace. Recalling the strict etiquette he had been drilled on, Derrick answered with unflinching composure. The Duke's piercing gaze locked onto him. Tell me, what tier of magic can you actually wield? I only possess a meager aptitude for basic mental magic. Do not spout lies in my presence. False humility is hardly a trait I consider virtuous. Only then did it strike Derrick, standing before Duke Duplin, an absolute monster of a mage, who had mastered all 5 elemental schools of magic. Playing the humble fool was a fatal miscalculation. If my previous words came across as insolent, I humbly ask for your forgiveness. I can deduce exactly why you chose to hide your true strength. But frankly speaking, neither your tender age nor your lackluster credentials qualify you as a proper magic tutor. Hearing those dismissive words, Derrick dropped the act, no longer bothering to conceal the unmistakable aura of his battle-hardened mercenary past. However, since you were handpicked by Aisling herself, I shall not block your path. You have my official blessing to proceed. You may enter the villa where Diella currently resides. I will dispatch a head maid to guide your path. You are dismissed now. Wait, may I ask a few crucial questions? Speak your mind. Only after receiving that silent, heavy nod of approval from the imposing Grand Duke, Derrick finally broke the silence. As your grace is well aware, I am a mercenary by blood and trade. But when I accept a contract, I see it through to the bitter end. Lady Eileen entrusted me with a monumental task to awaken Diella's magical potential and guide her through the treacherous viper pit of high society. The Grand Duke stared him down with freezing, apathetic eyes. Are those the burning questions you wish to ask? Stating the painfully obvious? Exactly my point. That is precisely why. Derrick fired back without missing a beat. I humbly request that your Grace grants me absolute authority over her. Only then can I fulfill this impossible commission. The very second those audacious words left the mercenary's lips, a dangerously subtle shift darkened Duke Duplin's face. Meanwhile, far away in another wing of the grand estate, the deafening crash of shattered porcelain echoed as Diella hurled another plate. Ah! Please forgive me! Lady Diella, what good are your pathetic, worthless apologies? Get out of my sight. If I catch you looking at me again, I will smash the next one right into your filthy face. Elsewhere, the mercenary guild master voiced his deep, lingering confusion. Why on earth would you allow a lowly commoner to tutor a noble in the mystic arts? The Grand Duke's response was chillingly composed. I exhausted every single option. I scoured the continent for the most legendary and renowned magic instructors alive, and every single one of them flatly refused. I was left with no choice. Sir Derrick may be a battlefield mercenary, but he intimately understands the complex etiquette and ruthless conduct of the aristocracy. His mentor was a fallen noble of high standing. He undoubtedly inherited those refined qualities from her. I see, the guildmaster muttered, nodding in sudden realization. Even though he lived on the battlefield, Sir Derrick carries himself with undeniable distinction and a genuinely noble heart. Perhaps he truly is the only one capable of guiding Diella out of her darkness. But suddenly, a freezing voice cut through the air. Lady Elaine, your judgment might still be fatally flawed. After all, Derrick was born in the darkest, most unforgiving slums. He was forged into a blood-soaked mercenary long before he ever learned the ways of the normal world. A man born from the shadows doesn't survive through soft grace or gentle kindness. Meanwhile, under the strict guidance of the head butler Delon, Derrick finally set foot in the lavish villa where the notorious Diella resided. He knocked steadily against the grand wooden doors several times. When absolute silence was his only answer, he confidently pushed the heavy doors open. Good morning. My name is Derrick, he announced with a calm, unwavering voice. I sincerely apologize for the sudden intrusion. But the haughty Diella didn't utter a single word in return. She completely ignored his polite greeting, simply flicking her finger to command him closer, treating him exactly like an obedient dog. But the very second, Derrick took a single, unsuspecting step forward into her domain. A wicked, triumphant smirk twisted across the noble woman's face. Without a shred of warning, she hoisted a massive bucket and dumped a vile, rotting mixture of kitchen scraps straight over Derrick's stoic face. Oops, it seems my hand just slipped. Diella giggled with venomous delight. I honestly thought a filthy street rat had scurried into my pristine room. So, you must be that low-born mercenary that the old butler was yapping about. Take a good look at yourself. You truly look exactly like vermin. I prepared this foul feast especially for a peasant like you. Does it help you remember the gutters you crawled from? The putrid stench of the sewer suits your aura perfectly. What an absolute pity, though. A welcome gift I prepared with such loving care, completely wasted on my floor. Despite the humiliating shower of garbage and venomous insults, Derrick's icy gaze remained entirely unfazed, locking dead onto Diella's eyes. That unwavering, predatory stare sent a sudden chilling shiver of discomfort down her spine. Masking her rising fear with pure, explosive rage, she lashed out without hesitation. She delivered a vicious kick to his body, sending the hardened mercenary crashing to the floor. How dare you look at me with those defiant eyes? She spat out in absolute fury, even kicking off her luxurious shoe in her violent fit. Know your miserable place. You filthy, worthless rat. Do you honestly believe a lowly dog like you is worthy of teaching me anything? It seems those pathetic commoners never beat a single ounce of decency into your skull. Meanwhile, far away from the chaotic tension of the villa, Duke Dupline sat alone in his grand study, drowning in an ocean of heavy, complicated thoughts. Their previous, intense conversation kept echoing in his mind. That unyielding, iron-willed mercenary, Derrick, had etched an overwhelmingly powerful impression deep into the Duke's memory. He vividly recalled Derrick's bold, uncompromising words, The simple fact that I am even sitting across from you right now proves that Miss Diella's behavioral problems are far from a simple fix. So, let me ask you straight, Your Grace, during my time as her instructor, exactly how much absolute authority, just how much absolute authority, are you entirely willing to grant me? Back at the grand, luxurious villa, Derrick slowly raised his hand high into the air and delivered a sharp, echoing slap that resonated violently across the room. The devastating blow landed perfectly on the arrogant lady's cheek. Without a doubt, Diella had never once in her pampered life imagined that anyone would ever dare to treat her with such blazing disrespect. She stared up at Derrick, her eyes trembling with absolute, raw disbelief. But the searing heat radiating from her skin left no room for denial. For the very first time since she was born, she had actually been physically struck. Breaking the suffocating silence, Derrick coldly spoke. "Get up on your feet." Flashback to exactly 3 years ago. Derrick posed a serious question to his wise and respected mentor, Katia. "Master, what would be the proper course of action if you happen to encounter an endlessly arrogant and hopelessly ungrateful disciple?" "Well," Katia had replied thoughtfully, after taking a moment to ponder the scenario, "I would do my utmost to understand them and offer my endless patience." But Derrick scoffed. "Isn't that far too idealistic? The true essence of teaching is forcibly guiding a wayward student toward a completely better path. If gentle understanding and soft tolerance utterly fail to yield any real results, then a drastically different approach must be taken." Intrigued, his master asked, "And exactly what ruthless method would that be?" Planting the deep, unshakable seeds of primal fear straight into their fragile minds. Snapping back to the harsh reality of the present, Diella was still hopelessly struggling to comprehend the sheer, unbridled audacity of being violently disciplined by a lowly commoner. Standing tall over her, Derrick's unyielding tone remained completely calm, collected, and terrifyingly controlled. "I will only say this one time. You need to learn how to treat the people around you with proper, basic care and fundamental respect. Now, get up." However, the very second she scrambled to her trembling feet, Diella fiercely swung her arm and slapped Derrick right across the face in a fit of rage. "Just who the hell do you think you are? A filthy, low-born mercenary, having the absolute nerve to try and lecture me?" But before her furious, venomous rant could even finish leaving her trembling lips, Derrick viciously struck her down a second time. "I absolutely will not repeat myself again," he warned with an icy, murderous glare. "Treat those around you with genuine care and respect." Astounded by this unbelievable, heaven-defying display of pure, undiluted audacity, Diella let out a bitter, almost psychotic laugh. "Head butler, what in the world are you idiots just standing around for? This pathetic, miserable bastard actually dared to lay a hand on my noble self." Hearing her frantic, piercing screams, the loyal butler Dellen bursted urgently into the grand parlor. "Heavens above! Lady Diella is actually injured. What is the absolute meaning of this madness? How dare you raise your filthy hand against the young miss? If His Grace the Duke ever finds out." But before the panicked, trembling butler could even finish his empty, foolish threat, Derrick calmly reached into his dark coat and revealed a stamped official parchment. "By the absolute, unyielding decree of His Grace, Duke Dupline himself, every single matter pertaining to the strict discipline and proper education of the young Lady Diella now falls completely under my absolute, unquestionable authority." Absolute authority. Whatever disciplinary methods he chooses have been officially sanctioned by His Grace. Staring blankly at the Duke's undeniable signature, Dellon was struck completely speechless for a moment. Only then did the crushing reality set in for Diella. This new tutor wasn't just strict, he was a walking nightmare, far more dangerous than she ever anticipated. Unsurprisingly, the scandalous rumor that Derrick had violently struck Diella quickly reached Balafrian's ears. "Brother, you need to calm down." The heavy oak doors blasted open as Balafrian stormed into the room, his eyes blazing with murderous intent as he locked onto Derrick. So, you are the lowly mercenary. Did you actually have the sheer audacity to lay your hands on Diela? Balafrian roared in pure fury. Brother, I said stand down. Breaking the suffocating tension, Derrick finally spoke up, his voice dangerously calm. I carry the absolute authority of the Duke himself. He is an honored guest, brought by the master, Rick stated, his tone freezing the entire room. Throwing a tantrum only pushes her further into a corner. And more importantly, Father has already given his total approval to these brutal methods. Just come with me. Scoffing in disgust, Balafrian suddenly turned his sharp, judging gaze toward Ray. As for you, Ray, keep your nose out of this mess and just focus on your own damn duties. I already caught wind of the rumors, Ray muttered under his breath. Honestly, Diela desperately needs to be beaten into shape if she is ever going to learn her place. Do not waste your breath, brother. Another chilling voice echoed through the hall. That girl lacks the power to cause any real harm to our family anyway. That pathetic excuse for a sister has been a hopeless lost cause for a very, very long time. Do not hold your breath expecting her to be miraculously fixed. Shortly after that bitter family exchange, Balafrian led the stoic Derrick deep into the heart of the main estate, stopping before the grand doors of the bedroom Diela, once occupied in the central mansion. This used to be her personal sanctuary back when she still lived among us. It has sat completely abandoned ever since. Derrick stepped inside, his sharp eyes scanning the forgotten space. Beyond, the expected porcelain dolls collecting dust in a noble girl's room. The surrounding walls were absolutely covered in vibrant, chaotic canvases. Diela used to have a fiery passion for painting. Balafrian murmured, his harsh demeanor softening into sorrow. Whenever she managed to finish a piece, her cheeks would flush red, and she would shyly tug at my sleeve, begging to show off her masterpiece. She was incredibly precious and full of life back then. But as you can see, the vast majority of these canvases were left tragically unfinished. They just stopping only after finishing the parts she enjoyed the absolute most. I lost my composure earlier, Balafrian admitted after a heavy pause. Please, accept my deepest apologies. Rick simply shook his head. It is fine. But why did you bring me here? I wanted you to see the real Diela, Balafrian replied, a heavy burden weighing on his words. She was never a vicious child who trampled on others. But somewhere along the dark line, she became twisted by a toxic obsession with noble bloodlines. Ultimately, she was cast out from the main estate and banished to this isolated villa. I do not know what corrupted her heart, but I absolutely cannot let them banish her to a bleak monastery. If she can just manage to master a single extraordinary spell, I might be able to sway our stubborn father. Balafrian bowed his head low. I beg of you, please, save Diela. Faced with this, a shocking display of a fiercely proud noble swallowing his pride, Derrick merely offered a nonchalant shrug. Instead, his piercing gaze drifted toward a worn-out spellbook resting on the desk, its fragile pages crammed with frantic handwritten notes. Are these theoretical texts regarding the law attribute? Yes, Balafrian confirmed. That is exactly what the High Nobles study. As Derrick's sharp eyes swept over the messy annotations, a bold hypothesis began to take root in his mind. I will do what I can, he stated plainly, handing the ancient tome back to Balafrian. Later, that dead of night, while Diela was still lost in a deep, peaceful slumber inside her room, a brutal bucket of freezing ice water was suddenly splashed right across her face. Derrick stood over her bed like a grim reaper. You can still sleep at a time like this? What the hell are you doing? Have you completely lost your mind? Diela shrieked. Get up. Come with me right now. Derrick commanded with bone-chilling coldness. You are insane. Where are you dragging me in the dead of night? But it did not matter how fiercely Diela thrashed or screamed. Not a single soul dared to cross Derrick's intimidating path. He ruthlessly dragged her straight out of the villa. Finally, after confirming that no one was lurking in the dark shadows, without warning, Derrick hurled her forcefully to the dirt. She sneered, a twisted smile forming as she gritted her teeth, in pure malice. Do you honestly think this is going to change a single thing? Stop acting so utterly ridiculous. Who do you even think you are? Since there are no wandering eyes around, Derrick spoke with a bone-chilling calmness. How about I share a rather fascinating and dark truth with you? From the very beginning, I never had the slightest intention of teaching you magic properly. As she took in the terrifying look in Derrick's eyes, Deela felt a freezing shudder violently crash down her spine. Does it not seem absolutely laughable to you? Why would a person crawling from the deepest depths of the abyss ever bow down to the title of a noble's tutor? It is nothing more than a worthless, pretty label. What on earth are you blabbering about? I never once planned to be your loyal magic instructor. I solely needed a perfectly flawless, legitimate disguise to finally take care of absolute garbage like you. Do you know how incredibly satisfying it is when the arrogant fools who believe themselves untouchable finally taste absolute terror? Do you seriously think you can commit an act like this and walk away unscathed? Oh, I absolutely can. Derrick replied with a dismissive, arrogant shrug. You are going to be locked away in a monastery soon anyway. Who in their right mind would ever believe a disgraced noble? Even if a tragic accident were to occur, I am merely a lowly commoner, altering the miserable fate of another peasant just to erase a high-ranking noble's headache. It is truly not a massive loss for anyone, and if I simply chose to vanish right now, no one would bat an eye. At the end of the day, I would actually be doing a massive favor for the Dupin family. Pure panic set in as Deela suddenly realized the grim reality. If Derrick truly unleashed his bloodlust, she would meet her pathetic end right there. Even sprinting back to the safety of the main villa would not guarantee her survival. This monster could effortlessly drag her screaming right back into the darkness. Pushed to the absolute brink, she made a desperate choice. She had to lose him in the labyrinth of the dense forest. She knew perfectly well that if she somehow managed to cross into the Duke's territory, the one facing the executioner's blade would be Derrick. But just then, a blinding, overwhelming magical aura illuminated the space around her. Snapping her head back, she watched in sheer horror as Derrick unleashed his devastating magic. A 2-star fireball spell. That alone proved that this 16-year-old mercenary had finally. At his young age, he was already a formidable 2-star mage. When the blazing sphere of fire detonated inches from her face, Deela collapsed to the blazing dirt, completely paralyzed by overwhelming terror. For the very first time in her sheltered life, the cold grip of death hovered right over her shoulder. Oh, my deepest apologies. Derrick sneered with ice in his veins. My hand slipped. Scrambling to her feet in pure desperation, Deela sprinted blindly into the pitch-black woods. But because she kept glancing back at her ruthless pursuer, her foot caught on a root, sending her crashing down hard. By the time she managed to drag herself up again, a barrage of deadly magical strikes was already closing the distance. Dodging by a hair, she heard his mocking voice. You move surprisingly well for prey, Derrick remarked, with a chilling calmness. Not bad at all, for a fragile bird who spends all day locked away in a gilded cage. Seizing the split second of his arrogant monologue, Deela bolted deeper into the shadows. Her mind raced. She knew that running aimlessly, like a hunted animal, was not a long-term survival plan. Sooner or later, his devastating power would catch up to her. Glancing back one last time, she noticed Derrick's aura had shifted entirely. He was now hyper-focused, tracing the residual magic lingering in the atmosphere. But when he finally snapped his gaze forward, Deela had completely vanished into the dense foliage. Staring at the labyrinth of trees, a sudden realization hit him. The landscape was identical to the mysterious artwork she obsessively painted. He realized this forest must have been her childhood sanctuary, and those stunning landscapes she painted on canvas? They were actually the physical manifestation of raw, untamed magic that she was unconsciously perceiving. Closing his eyes to feel the turbulent currents of mana flowing through the air, Derrick smiled. His theory was absolutely spot on. In that precise moment of distraction, Deela launched herself from the thick underbrush, gripping a heavy jagged stone as her ultimate weapon. But tragically, the power gap was just too massive. With a single, effortless flick of his finger, Derrick instantly shattered her final desperate strike into dust. Such incredible determination, he praised with a wicked grin. Realizing that running away was completely impossible, you decided to ambush me instead. I respect that fiery courage, but her spark was fading fast. Physically and mentally shattered beyond her absolute limits, Dila had zero strength left to take even a single step. It seemed this desperate game of cat and mouse reached his limit. "It is over," Derrick declared. "Any final words?" He advanced, his aura suffocating. "Did you really think I would beg?" Diela scoffed. Her pride remained unbroken. "Just strike me down. I refuse to grovel like some filthy commoner." Derrick's gaze narrowed. "Then tell me why," he asked. "Why are you so obsessed with your noble bloodline?" Those piercing words struck a deep nerve. Diela's body began to shake uncontrollably. "Because if I lose that, what else is even left of me?" she cried out. "Beyond this hollow title, do I have any actual worth? Magic. Everyone expects me to wield grand magic. Do you think I just sat around? I tried everything, but the mana simply rejects me. No matter how much blood and sweat I shed, nothing ever awakens. What more can I do? Whether it is spells or art, I am a complete failure. Strip away this noble lineage, and I am utterly nothing." Derrick's eyes darkened. "I see the heavy burden you carry," he whispered. "Then embrace your end with that pride." He raised his blade. Diela refused to run. Facing her absolute demise, she glared straight into his eyes. But in a breathtaking twist, a massive wall of frost erupted, blocking the lethal strike. Diela gasped, her eyes wide with absolute shock. The one who summoned this freezing barrier was none other than herself, the legendary magical failure. She stood entirely paralyzed, completely mind-blown that a life or death crisis had forced her dormant mana to awaken like this. "You did spectacularly, my lady." Derrick smiled gently, smoothly lowering his weapon. "Please forgive my extreme methods just now. Strictly speaking, that was not block a proper spell. It was just a raw eruption of hidden mana. But still, your survival instincts are incredible." The emotional dam finally broke. Every crushing insecurity Diela had swallowed down for so many agonizing years poured out in a devastating flood of tears. Judging from that raw energy output, Derrick analyzed. "Your magical core aligns with the wild attribute." "A wild attribute? What kind of untamed power was that?" "You see, high society nobles strictly study structured, refined elemental systems," he explained calmly. "But the brutal truth is, all magical academies, they share the exact same core essence. The real difference lies entirely in how a mage perceives and masters their mystical craft. You possess the wild attribute, lady Diela. That is exactly why forcing yourself to study stiff, structured, magical theories completely stunted your growth. And how could you possibly know that? Because my power flows from the very same wild attribute. I saw the hidden truth in your paintings. You are sensing the raw, untamed mana of nature and pouring it directly onto your canvas. Most mages born with this rare, untamed potential start feeling the pulse of nature's mana as mere children. But let us stop here for today. You are dismissed. For a first-time awakening, your results were spectacular. But the path ahead of you is still incredibly long. Tomorrow morning, the real training begins. I will teach you exactly how to actively draw that mana out." Just as he turned to leave, Diela called out, "Anyway, thank you. That painting of yours, the masterpiece, titled Twilight, it was already finished, wasn't it?" Derrick stopped dead in his tracks. A faint, mysterious smile touched his lips. "Yes, it was indeed perfectly completed. And you are the very first person to ever notice." Bright and early the next morning, Diela pushed herself to the limit, desperately trying to actively extract her mana. Yet, no matter how fiercely she concentrated, progress had completely hit a solid brick wall. While rushing down the halls to track down Derrick, Diela had ended up making two. But as she turned a corner, She accidentally startled a passing maid. Splash! The heavy basin of water slipped from the poor girl's trembling hands, completely soaking Diela's elegant dress. Time seemed to freeze. The maid's blood ran ice-cold with absolute terror. I am so incredibly sorry, Lady Diela. I made a catastrophic mistake. Please, please have mercy on me just this once. Anyone who knew the old, tyrannical Diela knew exactly how brutal her punishments could be. But right then, the absolute unthinkable happened. Instead of unleashing her blazing fury, Diela simply sighed softly. Just be more careful next time, she said calmly. The maid's jaw practically dropped to the floor. Without another word, Diela peacefully turned and walked away. Another servant quickly rushed over, whispering in shock, "Are you all right? She didn't strike you? I am perfectly fine. The rumors must be true. Something miraculous really did happen to her last night." Meanwhile, Derrick, after staying up the entire night, Derrick was dead to the world. But his deep slumber was suddenly shattered by a frantic knocking. It was immediately followed by the sharp, demanding voice of Diela. "My lady, please lower your voice. We must observe proper etiquette," Dylan whispered nervously, terrified of waking the household. Ignoring him completely, she barked, "Then tell me how to control my mana. I actually managed to awaken it. I tried using it a moment ago, but the raw energy is just too wild for me to handle." Hearing this revelation, Dylan froze completely in his tracks. He was absolutely paralyzed with shock. He could not believe it. To think the young miss awakened her aura after only a single day. "You promised you would teach me today," Diela demanded loudly. "So open this door and tell me the secret right this instant. Come back this afternoon." Derrick groaned tiredly from the other side. With a heavy, dismissive thud, he firmly locked the door. While Dylan was weeping, silent tears of absolute joy for his lady, Diela's face twisted into a terrifying, shadow-filled scowl. "Just who on earth do you think you are, to give me orders like some common servant? Open the door. Tell me the secret right now." But Derrick did not utter a single word. Unbothered by her blazing fury, he merely rolled over in bed and plunged straight back into dreamland. Meanwhile, in the halls, whispers began spreading like wildfire. "Did you hear the news? The wicked Lady Diela did not shatter a single plate today. I even spilled water on her dress this morning, and she spared me. I also heard a crazy rumor that she finally awakened her core. Is that really true? But that new tutor has only been here for 1 day." Overhearing this shocking gossip, Rike stopped dead in his tracks. Just what kind of unbelievable miracle were they talking about? Shortly after, Balafrian rushed to report this monumental incident to the Duke and Ray. "Diela actually awakened her mana?" "Yes, father," Balafrian replied earnestly, his eyes shining. "I confirmed the absolute truth with the butler and the maids multiple times." For the first time in ages, Duke Duplin set down his pen. "This is truly magnificent news for our family's future." "It is merely a basic mana awakening," Ray scoffed coldly, his eyebrows knitting together into a deep, cynical frown. "Father, isn't it entirely too soon to be celebrating?" "Ray, watch your tongue," Balafrian sharply reprimanded his brother. "Your own flesh and blood finally awakened her latent power. Even if you refuse to praise her, how can you be so utterly cold? Have you already forgotten the absolute mountain of sins she committed over all these miserable years?" Ray bit back with icy venom. "Are we seriously going to cancel her exile to the monastery just because of a minor awakening? This is completely absurd. A hasty and reckless mistake." As the brothers loudly bickered over Diela's sudden condition, the cold Duke completely ignored them, simply picking up his quill to write, as he silently returned to his towering stack of official paperwork. The afternoon sun soon began to set. When Derrick finally stepped into Diela's dim room, he found her sitting completely alone on her bed. "Are you throwing a childish tantrum?" he asked. "I am not throwing a tantrum," Diela snapped back, her voice dripping with absolute ice. "I am furious. Even if you are sulking like a child, reality remains the exact same. I just told you, I am overflowing with rage." Diela fired back. "Whether you are furiously angry or simply pouting," Derrick replied, his tone infuriatingly calm, "it does not change. the natural order of things. Every single step has its proper sequence. Dila's patience finally snapped into tiny pieces. I literally just said I am not sulking. I am blindingly angry. But as she furiously whipped her head around to glare at him, she found herself completely paralyzed. She was staring directly into the mesmerizing, piercing crimson eyes of her strict tutor. Her heart betrayed her, and she instinctively looked away. Fine. Whatever. Just pretend I am sulking. If you recklessly push your physical limits, simply because you managed to awaken your mana, you will completely collapse before you even begin. Derrick stated, his voice steady and unwavering. I am speaking from painful personal experience. True mastery demands absolute balance. Since you have rested in bed long enough, it is time to begin your formal mana activation. Yeah, whatever you say, Dila muttered under her breath. What an incredibly stiff and boring tutor, she commented softly. Would you prefer a teaching method that is slightly less rigid? Derrick asked, taking a step closer. In a sudden flash of heat, Dila vividly remembered the exact, deeply intimate way he had forced her dormant mana to awaken. Unconventional was a massive understatement. Her face flushed deep red, and she immediately shot up from the covers. On second thought, let us absolutely not do that. We are going to stick purely to standard mana activation. Derrick let her panic slide. Once you can circulate your inner mana freely through your veins, casting one-star magic will feel as effortless as breathing. He continued smoothly. The wild elemental attribute has always been chaotic. It never truly developed a proper, systematic foundation. Learning. Ironically, that exact unpredictable nature makes it the absolute perfect path for a completely self-taught journey. When you compare it to strictly governed, structured magic, the untamed wild attribute values true freedom above all else. Derrick's voice held a rare, absolute certainty. To be brutally honest, my lady, you are exceptionally suited for the wild attribute. Dila blinked, tilting her head. And what exactly does that mean? Exactly what it sounds like. Derrick replied without missing a beat. Your untamed spirit perfectly aligns with this raw power. And when combined with the ancient blood of House Dupine, your magical potential is utterly unrivaled. Hearing those words, Dila's entire aura shifted. Her eyes sparkled with newfound excitement. Wait, are you saying I am a natural prodigy? Yes, Derrick stated plainly. You subconsciously formed a defensive barrier the very moment your core awakened. That pure instinct alone proves your immense talent. Dila grinned from ear to ear. Ah, so that means I am an absolute genius, right? Derrick sighed, pouring cold water on her parade. Talent and genius are two very different concepts. Do not confuse them. Dila waved her hand dismissively. Yeah, whatever you say, Mr. Buzzkill. As the two continued their intense mana activation training, they remained completely oblivious to the shadows lurking nearby. Outside the window, Reg watched them in dead silence. His face was twisted in a dark, threatening scowl, visibly furious that Dila had successfully awakened her magical core. Over the next few days, Dila became Derrick's personal shadow. Derrick! I can activate my mana now, but the flow is still completely chaotic. Later, she bounded up to him again, brimming with energy. Derrick, look! Freezing air is gathering in my palm, but the energy feels so weird. She simply would not leave him alone for a single second. Derrick, listen! I can sense the mana currents, but it is tickling my veins. She even tracked him down in the deepest depths of the Grand Library. Derrick, I have been looking for you all day. What are you doing in here? Do you honestly think my father lent you those legendary grimoires just for light reading? Yes, Derrick replied with his usual stoic calm. The Duke granted me unrestricted access to study the ancient magical archives within this estate. Dila leaned in, her eyes narrowing playfully. Then what is your ultimate goal? Anyway, I finally activated my mana exactly as you taught me. Come outside and watch. However, as the sun set, the cheerful atmosphere vanished. Later that night, the air in the estate grew suffocatingly heavy. Balefrian sat alone in his dimly lit study, his expression uncharacteristically grave. A soft knock echoed through the room. "I heard you summoned me. You came. Take a seat," Bailiff Frian commanded, his tone dead serious. He steepled his fingers, his eyes piercing through the gloom. "Tell me, how has my sister Diella been progressing lately?" "She has. I have made significant progress," Derry reported, his voice steady, "but breaking through to cast 1-star magic. That will still take some time." "I understand," Bailiff Frian nodded. "However, my mother returns from the high society season next week. Consider this your final warning," the young lord continued, his tone darkening. "The matriarch is not someone you can easily fool. The estate staff might play nice and seem cooperative for now, but never forget. The nobility absolutely loathes seeing a mere commoner holding any real power. You grasp the weight of this, right?" "I will keep it in mind," Derry replied coolly. "So, why did you really summon me here?" Bailiff Frian puffed out his chest, declaring that as the future patriarch of the Dupline family, it was his sacred duty as the head of the household to embrace and nurture every single soul under his roof. A nearly impossible burden to bear. The human heart is a complex labyrinth, he sighed dramatically. It would be an absolute dream if everyone simply shared the same glorious values and beliefs. But alas, reality is a cruel mistress. The serious atmosphere suddenly shattered as Bailiff Frian cried out, "Diella is my precious little angel, but lately, she refuses to even play with me." Hearing this sudden whining, Derrick stood there, absolutely dumbfounded. Ignoring his silence, Bailiff Frian rambled on, asking if Derrick remembered how beautifully Diella used to smile and greet him back when they were just kids. "It feels like it was just yesterday," he wept. Could a more divine creature possibly exist in this universe? Gripping him tightly, Bailiff Frian desperately asked if Derrick knew of any secret method to win back his sweet sister's affection. Exhausted by the dramatic shift, Derrick deadpanned, asking why on earth he was coming to him for this. After all, Diella used to follow Bailiff Frian around, like a lost puppy. But truth be told, as Bailiff Frian himself had noticed, Diella had actually been trailing after Derrick all over the estate lately. Refusing to face reality, Bailiff Frian's eyes suddenly gleamed with madness. He demanded that Derrick look at a new skill he had picked up from the maids. He proudly presented a handcrafted doll, asking if it didn't perfectly capture the adorable Diella's exact likeness, and if it would finally convey his overflowing love. Her brother threw that cursed object. Meanwhile, Derrick, with his signature bluntness, looked the lord of Bailiff Frian dead in the eye, asking if he was trying to cast some twisted curse on Diella with that dark artifact. Bailiff Frian's face twisted in pure annoyance, scoffing that Derrick was utterly useless. But the real storm was brewing. Exactly 1 week later, the Grand Duchess made her grand return. She claimed to have heard endless praises about Derrick. Rumors that the estate had somehow recruited a magic instructor of monstrous, almost terrifying capabilities. And she stepped forward, introducing herself as Miria d'Ibel Duplin. With an elegant smile, the Grand Duchess added that if Derrick wouldn't mind the intrusion, she would be absolutely delighted to send a mountain of lavish gifts to the noble territory that he hailed from. But Derrick's response shattered the illusion. He flatly stated that he belonged to no noble house whatsoever. Upon hearing those words, Miria froze as if struck by lightning. Derrick had no lands, no aristocratic bloodline, no prestigious family name. He was merely a lowly commoner. Her mind scrambled, finding it impossible to believe that the peerless magic instructor that high society was whispering about was nothing more than a peasant, crawling up from the dirt of the streets. The moment the devastating reality sank in, Miria's elegant facade shattered. She stormed straight into the Grand Duke's private office. "Did you seriously allow filthy commoner scum to serve as the personal magic instructor for our Diella? Have you completely lost your noble mind?" The Grand Duke merely furrowed his brows, calmly replying that his hearing was perfectly intact, and there was absolutely zero need for her to screech like a banshee. Miria's eyes turned to ice, biting back that his hearing was not the issue here. The issue was Diella, their innocent, precious youngest daughter. Sighing heavily, the Grand Duke explained that while the idea of employing commoners repulsed him as well, Every single arrogant noble instructor with an acceptable bloodline had already cowardly rejected their desperate offer. Even so, Miria fiercely insisted that letting a blood-stained mercenary who survived in the gutters teach high magic to their Diella was a complete disgrace, utterly unacceptable to their house's honor, especially when finding a magic instructor of proper standing was like finding a needle in a haystack. The Grand Duke shot back, defending that Derrick had been highly, personally recommended by Eli herself, but Miria refused to yield, snapping back that there absolutely must be. There has to be a bare minimum standard. Why not invite your own younger brother? She continued her relentless verbal assault, claiming that while he might have rejected the offer in the past due to his demanding schedule, the circumstances had drastically changed now. Diella had finally awakened her magical mana. And yet, this fool of a patriarch was actually assigning a lowly border defense officer as her private tutor. Did he honestly believe that managing an estate and governing a territory was some kind of trivial game? Miria pressed the attack, demanding to know about the upcoming social season. Did he seriously think that surviving the venomous vipers of high society was going to be a simple stroll? That world was a ruthless battlefield, where a noble's instructor dictated the absolute foundation of their future. Despite all this, he had still chosen a nameless, absolute nobody of a commoner, a man with zero backing and zero status. He was practically setting Diella up to become a complete social outcast the very second she stepped foot into noble circles. Just as the tension peaked, Balafrian stepped into the heavy atmosphere of the office. "Mother, I ask that you please calm down. Surely you didn't march all the way here just to pick a fight with father, right? Step back and stay out of this." Balafrian, this absolute outrage cannot be swept under the rug so easily. Does this filthy commoner actually possess the legendary qualifications required to teach our Diella the arcane arts? That is the real issue at hand. No. But the very moment Miria laid her piercing eyes on Ray, a flicker of relief washed over her gaze. For a mere peasant to act as a magical guide for high nobility is practically unheard of. However, if this commoner truly possesses the overwhelming aptitude required, then I suppose I don't see a fundamental flaw in this arrangement. "Father," Rick suddenly chimed in, "I am more than willing to personally test Derrick's capabilities. Let us clash in an official magical duel. His performance on the battlefield against me will undeniably prove if, from a true mage's perspective, he actually wields the overwhelming power you claim." The very second that arrogant challenge echoed through the room, Ray fell into a cold, absolute silence. Moment, and then a chilling smirk crossed his face. "Allow me to test Diella's abilities myself." It was only in that tense moment that Balafrian finally realized just how much venomous hatred Rick harbored toward his very own flesh and blood. He claimed that if Derrick was truly a master-class instructor, then his student Diella should have already achieved a monstrous level of magical growth. "I am perfectly willing to evaluate her true worth by crushing Diella in a full-blown magic duel." After a heavy silence, the Grand Duke finally caved and accepted Rick's ruthless proposal. The second they stepped out of the Grand Office, Balafrian cornered Rick in the shadowy corridor. "What in the world is going through your head right now? Why push for a brutal magic duel against your own sister?" Rick scoffed. "Brother, do you honestly believe that Diella has turned over a new leaf? Have you forgotten the absolute nightmare she put us through?" Balafrian frowned. "No matter what happens, she is still our one and only sister. She shares our noble bloodline, and it is our sworn duty to protect, endure her flaws. That so-called noble blood you defend is exactly what will burn this illustrious family to ashes." Rick fired back with absolute ice in his voice. "Everything she has already done is proof enough. If that walking disaster enters high society, it will trigger the ultimate catastrophe. Do you really not see the truth? The one who completely shattered the final boundary was Diella. She should have been banished to the remote countryside from the very beginning." Caught in the crushing crossfire between his fiercely warring younger siblings, Balafrian stood frozen in pure agony. A short time later, the moment Diella caught wind of this, outrageous decree. She stormed straight into Derrick's quarters. Why the fierce rush so early in the morning? What chaos has erupted now? Diela did not even utter a single word, she just slammed an official decree onto the heavy oak desk, right in front of him. If I am defeated in this magic duel, you will be stripped of your position. I have already heard the rumors that young Master Rick is a formidable one-star mage, Derrick stated with an unbreakable calm. This battle is not going to be a walk in the park. Is that seriously all you have to say? If I fall, you will be thrown to the streets. I am just a simple mercenary, he casually replied. As long as the commission is fulfilled, Derrick stated with chilling nonchalance, and the gold makes its way into my pocket. That is all that matters. I require nothing else. And up until this very moment, I have been compensated more than enough. Hearing those cold, mercenary words, Diela froze, her heart plummeting. Are you actually being serious? Before she knew it, a week vanished in a flash, setting the stage for destiny. The fateful day of the magical clash between Diela and Rick had finally descended upon them. With the sole exception of Eli, who was handling matters far beyond the estate's borders, practically every influential figure of the prestigious Dupin bloodline had gathered to witness the event. You have arrived. Upon locking eyes with the intimidating Grand Duke, Derrick offered a flawless, formal bow. Yet, judging by his unwavering stance, it was blatantly obvious to everyone watching that he wasn't the slightest bit nervous. This unshakable aura immediately planted a seed of dark suspicion in the Grand Duke's mind. Derrick's absolute confidence in the face of such overwhelming stakes made it incredibly foolish to dismiss him or cast him aside so hastily. However, what the audience completely failed to realize in that moment was the dark malice brewing. For Rick, this was no ordinary test of skill. It was a brutal execution. He fully intended to seize this golden opportunity to utterly and completely shatter Diela's future. On the other side of the arena, stepping onto a magical battlefield for the very first time, Diela stood tall. Her trembling hands were hidden beneath a fierce, unyielding gaze. In that tense moment, her mind drifted back to the devastating afternoon she shared with Derrick. So, you really aren't going to intervene any further than this? You can already feel the shift inside you, Derrick had replied, his voice a pool of endless calm. The violent storms of your mana have finally stabilized and taken root. You might not possess the strength to cast true one-star magic just yet, but it is only a matter of time before you shatter those limits. After all, you carry the legendary, untamed bloodline of the Dupin family flowing through your veins. Why are you saying all of this? Out of nowhere? I have already told you the truth. The power of the wild attribute has always been a solitary path, meant for those who forge their own destiny through self-teaching. Hearing those parting words, the weight of reality crashed over Diela, bringing her to the verge of tears. Why? Why are you pushing me away now, Derrick? I know I am far from being the perfect disciple, but I still burn with the desire to master the arcane arts with you by my side. I absolutely refuse to let anyone else take your place and teach me. Let me make one thing perfectly clear. Derrick responded without a single shift in emotion. I do not understand noble etiquette, nor do I care for the restrictive, formal rules that govern these pathetic magical duels of the elite. I know nothing of noble duels, nor have I ever fought in one. But if it is a real fight, I can teach you exactly how to crush your enemies. In that breath, cruel whispers of the past echoed in Diela's mind. Venomous rumors she could never forget. How could someone so weak possibly share the blood of the prestigious House Dupin, especially with such prodigies for brothers? It seems their glorious lineage has finally begun its pathetic downfall. As those mocking voices clawed at her memories, a blazing fire ignited within Diela's once timid eyes. I want to win. I will absolutely win this. In that fateful moment, Diela cast aside the shadow of being Reich's fragile little sister and stood fiercely as the proud disciple of Derrick, a true mage, carving her own destiny with her own two hands. The whispers in the crowd swelled. It is starting. The clash is finally about to begin. The highly anticipated magical duel between Diela and Rick was officially underway. Watching Diela step onto the cold stone of the arena, Rick felt a chill of unfamiliar dread crawl up his spine. She was actually standing against him, radiating an aura of absolute unyielding determination. As their intense gazes collided like striking swords, Delon's booming voice shattered the heavy silence. Both combatants, ready yourselves for the trial of combat. This sacred clash will strictly adhere to standard dueling protocols, with the magical protection barriers fully engaged. The rules are simple. The first person to trigger their emergency ward will be immediately declared the absolute loser of this match. This is your final warning. Assume your stances. Let the duel begin. The defensive artifacts were designed to deploy a shield automatically, mere milliseconds before a fatal or critical strike could land, instantly neutralizing the opponent's destructive magic. Watching from the sidelines, Derrick smirked, amused by the sheer extravagance. He had always wondered how high society fought their battles, to casually burn through such absurdly expensive artifacts, just for a simple sparring match. It was a blatant flex of their bottomless wealth and privilege. The battle barrier would hold the arena for exactly 10 minutes, but Rick's bloodlust was obvious. He clearly wanted to end this humiliation long before the timer ran out. A draw was completely unacceptable to his pride, so he approached this clash with deadly seriousness. In the very split second, the match officially kicked off. Violent energy surged. As Rick condensed a storm of mana into the palm of his hand, he raised his hand high, beginning the incantation for his spell. While his mana gathered, Diela stood absolutely still, her piercing gaze locked fiercely onto his figure. In the world of magical duels, the ultimate deciding factor always came down to the sheer speed of casting. When fighting from a distance, the mage who finished their chant first almost always secured the upper hand and claimed absolute victory. In Ray's arrogant mind, crushing a girl like Diela would only take a single, basic 1-star tier spell. I am sorry about this, he thought with a smirk, but you are heading straight back to that pathetic little village. The very second his magical incantation ended, his 1-star destructive spell erupted into existence. The Gale Blade ripped through the air, tearing the wind apart, as it rushed straight for Diela. From Ray's overconfident perspective, there was absolutely no way someone as painfully slow as her could ever dodge this incoming strike. He could already picture it perfectly. His blade of wind smashing into her protective barrier, sending Diela instantly packing and teleporting her straight back to the countryside. But what he completely failed to notice was the blazing, unbreakable resolve burning fiercely within the girl's eyes, while he merely brushed her off as a slight threat to his family's grand legacy. At that exact fraction of a second, Diela suddenly dropped her stance low and exploded to the side. She dodged with a terrifying agility that defied all logic. There was zero room for doubt now. The shocking evolution Diela was displaying had completely shattered all of Ray's arrogant expectations. Do not even think you can escape me. Gritting his teeth in pure frustration, Ray violently pumped more mana into the spell, twisting the destructive path of his Gale Blade. The vicious arc of wind violently curved through the air, launching itself aggressively right at Diela's back. Based entirely on his flawed understanding of the world, a sheltered girl who had been trapped in a rural village for years could never possibly match the physical stamina of a normal combatant. But if he had managed to catch even a single glimpse of her terrifying expression, at that moment, all his foolish assumptions would have instantly crumbled to dust. Even though Ray was gifted at wielding multiple magical attributes, the harsh truth was he was still an absolute novice when it came to actual combat, and recklessly forcing his spell to unnaturally shift its course would only end up exposing his biggest fatal weakness. It was draining his mana at a terrifyingly rapid pace. Just as Rick believed that Diela had absolutely nowhere left to run, a massive wall of ice erupted straight from the earth, violently intercepting the incoming Gale Blade head-on. Under any normal circumstances, a basic wall of frost, conjured purely out of raw mana, would never be able to withstand the devastating impact of multi-attribute magic. However, because Rick had violently forced a sudden change in the trajectory of his Gale Blade, its destructive power had dropped drastically. Even so, Rick scoffed at the idea that Diela could keep blocking his lethal strikes using such pathetic and simple parlor tricks. Holding his ground, Rick began to furiously chant his spell once again. This time around, he intended to unleash 3 devastating Gale Blades in rapid succession. It was his absolute specialty. If Diela really wanted to keep scurrying around from side to side like a trapped rat, all he needed to do was completely seal off every single one of her escape routes. And Rick certainly refused to believe that she could miraculously rely on those flimsy ice walls to stop his barrage of blades again. Listen closely. Derrick had already drilled it into Diela's mind that hardened mercenaries fight in a completely different world than pampered nobles. They do not care about achieving an honorable victory. Their only obsession is absolute triumph. It is entirely different from your typical, flashy magic duel among the aristocracy. Even if you emerge victorious, they might still criticize your ruthless methods, but the ultimate goal is still accomplished. Are you truly prepared to learn the mercenary way? Absolutely I am. This time, I am going to win. Snapping back to the brutal reality of the present, Diela began to analyze the battlefield exactly as her master, Derrick, had taught her. She immediately channeled her aura and manifested several additional towering pillars of solid ice across the battlefield. Then, she burst into motion, weaving between them like a phantom, using the pillars as heavy cover as she sprinted forward. Even though the raw, overwhelming power of Rick vastly outclassed Diela's own magic, she never once forgot the golden lesson Derrick imparted. Even when there is an impossible gap in sheer strength, absolute victory was still within reach. Because this was no mere, it was a brutal fight for survival. And just as Derrick had perfectly calculated, Rick was fundamentally flawed and completely inexperienced in actual combat. By constantly forcing his deadly Gale Blades to shift their trajectory, Rick rapidly burned through his own mana reserves. This caused the sheer speed and destructive power of his attacks to plummet far below the terrifying standard of advanced multi-attribute magic. And that was the sole reason Diela managed to narrowly dodge each devastating strike. Derrick's teachings echoed in her mind. True combat is all about manipulating the battlefield and ruthlessly exploiting every single advantage you can possibly find. In other words, do absolutely whatever it takes to win, even feeding your enemy's arrogance and planting a false sense of security in their mind. That too can become a lethal weapon. Realizing she could no longer completely evade the incoming onslaught, Diela desperately called upon her magic once again. She erected a massive wall of solid ice to block the fiercely approaching First Star Gale Blade. However, having only recently awakened her magical core, the overwhelming physical toll of such an intense magical clash was already tearing at her limits. Right at that critical moment, Rick's arrogant voice echoed across the arena, coldly declaring that it was all over. The very split second she heard those chilling words, Diela violently whipped her head around. The final, hidden Gale Blade that Rick had secretly unleashed had already bypassed her icy defenses from behind. As the devastating magic slammed violently into its target, the entire dueling arena was instantly swallowed by a massive cloud of thick smoke and dust, completely blinding Derrick's line of sight. Yet, despite the chaos, he didn't show a single ounce of panic. He had absolute faith that Diela wouldn't fall so easily. But the same certainly couldn't be said for the Grand Duchess. She sat completely frozen in pure terror, up in the grandstands. Diela! Catherine, what in the world are you waiting for? Stop this savage duel right now, and bring her back to me safely. But just then, the Grand Duke's voice sliced through the panic with chilling absolute calm, ordering her to stand down. The battlefield has not been settled yet, he declared. Are you out of your mind? You saw the devastating impact. Diela was completely swallowed by that magic blast. Look closer, the Grand Duke replied, his expression unreadable as still water. General Pallor's protective artifact never activated. But the Grand Duke's piercing gaze wasn't just focused on the shattered arena floor. His sharp eyes were locked onto Derrick, who sat in the VIP stands like a silent phantom. Watching the chaos from the very beginning, Derrick hadn't even blinked a single time, as if this entire death match was following his exact script. Down in the arena, with the victor completely unknown, Reg stepped cautiously into the thick, swirling dust cloud. Basic logic dictated that Diela's body should have been ripped to shreds by that first star Gale blade, but the general's life-saving barrier remained totally dormant. Suddenly, a cold sweat broke out on Reg's neck. Through a shattered gap in the arena floor, he caught a glimpse of a deadly, familiar shadow lurking below. Before his warrior instincts could even trigger, the wooden planks beneath his boots screamed in violent protest. In the blink of an eye, massive, jagged spikes of frost erupted violently from the depths of the stage, launching a merciless ambush right beneath Reg's feet. Thanks to his terrifying combat reflexes, he twisted his body just in the nick of time. The vicious ice only shredded the edge of his battle cloak. Reg's eyes widened in absolute shock, unable to believe that the proud Diela had actually burrowed underneath the dueling platform to launch such a dirty, underhanded sneak attack. According to the absolute laws of combat, set by Delon earlier, stepping out of bounds meant instant and humiliating disqualification. Yet, a quick glance at Delon's unfazed expression proved the horrifying truth. Diela had somehow found a loophole in the Magic Duel's sacred rules. Even so, this kind of savage, street-level fighting style was completely unheard of in a duel of honor between nobles. But as that dark realization flashed through Reg's mind, the splintering floorboards below him, the stone arena beneath his feet violently shattered once again. Though his footwork was stripped of its usual noble grace, Reich narrowly dodged a deadly spike of frost that erupted from the shadows below. But this frosty nightmare was far from over. In the blink of an eye, 3 more massive glacial pillars exploded right beside him. There was no mistaking it. Every single relentless strike erupting from beneath the battle stage was locked entirely onto Reich. These vicious attacks were impossible to predict, completely hidden in darkness. A single, clean hit from those frozen blades would spell instant and total defeat. At this point, every last trace of aristocratic elegance had completely vanished from Diela. It was in that breathless second that Reich finally locked onto her exact location, lurking deep beneath the fighting stage. And when their gazes finally met in the shadows, he truly saw Diela's eyes. They were a complete, emotionless void. That absolute emptiness was not a gaze Diela should possess. Yet, a chilling wave of déjà vu washed over Reich. He had absolutely seen that deadened stare before. The realization hit him like a lightning bolt. Those were the exact same eyes as that ruthless mercenary, the one who did not even flinch when Valafrian violently lifted him by the collar. In that fraction of a second, Reich finally understood the terrifying truth. Diela's brutal, survivalist combat tactics carried the undeniable, bloodstained signature of her magic tutor. Now that the grim reality was out in the open, there was absolutely no reason for Reich to maintain his polished, perfect facade as a noble heir. Without a second of hesitation, he ripped the heavy cape right off his shoulders. If Diela was willing to throw away the proud chivalry of an aristocratic duel and fight like a cornered beast just for the taste of victory, then he would gladly meet her in the mud. Triggered by Diela's merciless transformation, Reich completely shattered the dignified, high society stance he had rigidly maintained his entire life. The crowd gasped in horror. What is the meaning of this? Crawling beneath the arena floor like an insect? It is absolutely filthy down in those shadows. My dear, what on earth are you doing? Halt this savage duel immediately. But a stern voice countered. Diela has broken 0 rules. Let this brutal battle continue. The battle raged on. Having survived his youth on countless blood-soaked battlefields, the legendary Grand Duke, Dupin didn't even flinch. With his chin casually resting on his hand, his piercing gaze followed every movement of the deadly duel below. Meanwhile, lurking in the shadows beneath the arena, Diela wasn't just throwing wild attacks. She was analyzing every subtle shift above her, reading the binzes. Very flow of magic itself. At the exact moment Rick began his spell chant, Deala locked onto his precise coordinates by tracing the surging currents of his aura, leaving Rick trapped, with only two desperate choices. Either shatter his own spell to dodge the incoming strike, or forcibly twist his disparate, offensive magic into a desperate shield. During this suffocating stalemate, Rick instantly saw through Deala's terrifying strategy. Her true goal? She was trying to drain him dry. She was deliberately exhausting his mana core. But right at that critical breaking point, Rick finally discovered the perfect loophole to shatter her trap. At that exact second, Deala felt a chilling sensation. The raging aura above the arena had completely vanished without a single trace. She instantly knew he was plotting something, but no matter what terrifying scheme Rick was cooking up, her winning condition remained exactly the same. All she had to do was relentlessly crush his magical chance. But then, even DeLon gasped in pure disbelief, recognizing the sudden 10% shift in the flow of battle. Rick had completely vanished from the ground, scaling the towering flagpole that proudly displayed the Din family crest. From up in the sky, it would be absolutely impossible for Deala to track the subtle magical vibrations of his spellcasting. However, at the Numergen exact same time, Rick could no longer stabilize his own devastating incantation. With his back against the wall, the only brutal option left was to completely obliterate the Duel platform itself. Without a single second of hesitation, Rick unleashed his explosive aura and fired a blinding beam of concentrated magic straight at the base of the massive pillar. The catastrophic impact instantly snapped the giant structure in half. The legendary family crest plummeted to the earth, crashing down with an earth-shattering roar. Seizing this split-second opening, Rick launched himself onto the crumbling mast. His battle strategy was brilliantly reckless. As the massive structure obliterated the arena platform, he would ride the wreckage straight into the abyss. Watching from above, Miria froze in absolute shock. She could not fathom that the son she once raised with such immense pride would resort to such underhanded methods. But right now, Ray could not care less about his honor. The very second his boots hit the shattered ground beneath the stage, his eyes darted for Deala through the suffocating storm of debris. Suddenly, a shadowy figure blurred into motion. Without wasting a single breath on hesitation, Reich unleashed another devastating mana arrow. In that exact fraction of a second, Deala sensed the terrifying surge of magical energy tearing through the air around her. Her instinct screamed to gather her aura and summon a massive pillar of frost. But a harsh reality quickly struck her. Her spiritual reserves were completely drained. She was entirely locked out of her spellcasting and needed to regenerate her core while desperately dodging death. By some absolute miracle of fate, the blinding cloud of dust forced Reich's deadly magical projectile to veer just inches away from her vital spots. Yet, what truly sent a chill down Reich's spine was that Deala was closing the distance. Instead of falling back, she charged straight into the danger zone. One single, clean magical strike would have spelled her absolute doom. Instead, Deala threw away her identity as a mage and unleashed a bone-crushing physical kick aimed directly at his ribcage. In that heart-stopping moment, Reich stared deep into her eyes and saw pure, unadulterated bloodlust. It was a terrifying gaze he had witnessed countless times during his harsh childhood, the burning glare of a survivor willing to cross any moral line just to claim their absolute victory. The brutal impact landed flawlessly, knocking the wind entirely out of Reich. But what he completely failed to anticipate was her true follow-up strike. Deala scooped up a handful of coarse dirt and hurled it violently right into his face. Even though his sharpened battle instincts read her ruthless intent in a flash, Reich was still utterly caught off guard, found itself trapped in that split-second opening. Seizing that desperate chance, Deala dragged herself back onto the devastated battle arena, using a shattered mast for support. Her desperate struggle painted a painfully clear picture for Ray. Her mana core was completely running on empty, which was brutally obvious by how her trembling legs barely kept her upright. Yet, Rick could read her unwavering resolve without a single word. I will claim this victory. No matter the absolute agonizing cost, I will forge my true worth in the fires of triumph. These fearless actions from Diela instantly ignited Rick's own warrior spirit, not merely as a fierce rival, but as a true comrade in arms. By the time Rick heavily stepped back onto the ruined stage, he found Diela standing tall, silently piercing his soul with her unwavering gaze. Her battered body was drenched in crimson, but the overwhelming beast in her eyes burned brighter than any mortal star. In that frozen, breathless second, a precious memory washed over Diela. She remembered Derrick's profound lesson from that quiet, unforgettable night. Picture a sprawling, vibrant city being brought to life with massive, sweeping strokes. Your flowing mana is the endless ink, and your powerful incantations form the mighty brush. Draw all those scattered, chaotic hues together with your will, and paint your grand masterpiece. That is the true essence of magic. Beneath a breathtaking canopy of stars, the silver-haired youth, a boy forged in the bloody fires of a mercenary life, had spoken those profound words with galaxies practically swirling in his eyes. It was on that very fateful evening that the young girl felt a sudden, overwhelming hunger to paint her own magnificent destiny across the heavens. The glittering constellations, the boundless mana dancing through the wind, and that gentle, white-haired boy standing right beside her. She hungered to capture every single, breathtaking piece of it, slowly shutting her heavy eyelids. The brilliant warmth of that memory violently flared back to life inside Diela's mind, even as her mana core screamed in utter agony. Reaching deep into her very soul, she envisioned herself wildly painting across an infinite, cosmic canvas with nothing but her bleeding fingertips. And then, like an ancient miracle, the ambient mana lingering in the atmosphere furiously answered her silent cry. Raw mana violently converged in her trembling hands, manifesting as a bone-chilling frost. The immense power of her very first creation was finally taking shape. In that breathtaking fraction of a last second, when her eyes snapped open, she unleashed her ultimate strike, the absolute peak of transcended magic. A spear of pure ice, radiating a bone-chilling frost, suddenly materialized right by her side. First star magic. The legendary ice spear. The sheer intensity of the sight made Delon tremble with visible shock. My dear, look at that. It is first star magic. Diela had actually conjured first star magic. A flawless ice spear. She had finally pushed past her limits. The very second the frosty weapon took its terrifying form, every single person around the arena was too stunned to even breathe, let alone interfere. Ray, standing directly in its path, made a silent vow to offer his sister the absolute highest level of respect in battle. Without a single moment of hesitation, he instantly formed multiple glowing mana arrows all at once. Even with Diela wielding such destructive first-star magic, Ray remained completely confident that the final outcome would not change. The very instant the deadly ice spear achieved its ultimate, perfect form, Diela launched it mercilessly straight at Ray. In that exact same breath, Ray unleashed every single magical arrow surrounding him. The two overwhelming forces of first-star magic violently collided right in the dead center of the arena, triggering an incredibly explosive, earth-shattering shockwave. A massive cloud of dust swallowed the battlefield once again. Up in the stands, a mother's heart pounded with overwhelming anxiety for her precious youngest daughter. As the thick, chaotic smoke slowly began to clear out, the imposing aura of General Balor suddenly manifested inside the arena, officially signaling the end of their brutal duel. Both Diela and Ray had finally discovered their own undeniable truths in that epic clash. When the dust finally settled, the life-altering duel that would ultimately decide Derrick's heavy fate finally revealed its true victor. But wait, flashback to exactly 1 year ago. Delon was urgently informing Duke Duplin that a mysterious letter had arrived that very morning, containing crucial details about the upcoming high society gathering. As the two noblemen walked down the grand hallway, the Duke caught a glimpse of Diela in her room, looking utterly heartbroken and completely abandoned. But as the dust settled on the battlefield, it was revealed that Miria's defensive barrier had triggered instead. In that agonizing moment, the cruel reality crashed down on Diella. She had completely lost the duel. A heart-wrenching scream tore from her throat, fueled by absolute devastation, while her mother erupted in fury, viciously scolding her husband for permitting such a barbaric and vulgar display of violence. But as the frantic woman continued her nagging, Duel completely tuned her out, keeping his eyes locked on his defeated daughter. He recognized a spark within her. Decades ago, Duel had been a ferociously loyal knight who bled for his king, standing as a mountain of strength even through the darkest eras of war. Back in those blood-soaked days, his liege had praised the unyielding, monstrous ambition blazing in his eyes. And now, staring down at his fallen daughter, he saw that exact same legendary fire of boundless ambition awakening within her gaze. Anxious maids frantically swarmed the ruined platform, desperately checking to see if their young lady had sustained any fatal injuries. But Diella remained utterly forlorn, silent, hot tears streaming down her face like a broken dam. When a terrified servant reached out to heal her bleeding wounds, Diella violently slapped the hand away. Stepping down from the shattered arena, she walked right past Reich, who could only offer a hesitant, awestruck word of praise for her fierce effort. The servants assumed she would flee straight to her chambers to hide her shame, but her stubborn feet carried her relentlessly forward, heading straight for where Derrick was sitting. Halting her steps right in front of him, the heavy walls of her pride crumbled. She poured out all her agonizing pain and soul-crushing frustration over her defeat. With hot tears clouding her vision, she bitterly begged Derrick for his forgiveness over her humiliating loss. Derrick slowly rose to his feet, his towering presence declaring that tasting defeat was never the end. He ordered her to forge that agonizing frustration into a weapon, to use it as a stepping stone to climb higher and become absolutely unstoppable. His profound words struck the deepest chords of her heart, making her weep even harder, while the helpless maids watched the emotional scene unfold, completely unsure of how to comfort her. Just then, her mother rushed into the set picture, enveloping Diella in a desperately protective embrace, while showing deep compassion for her shattered pride. As the young girl tried to force out an explanation, her mother gently shushed her, letting the warmth of love take over. Words are completely unnecessary. He pulls her into a warm embrace, softly urging her to go and heal those painful battle scars before anything else. The moment she finally steps away, the mysterious woman approaches Rick. Her hands weave. She unleashes her fury, screaming that he is nothing but a miserable, vulgar commoner. She scoffs, claiming that even though he might have helped Diella awaken her powers as a one-star mage, that certainly does not mean he is anyone special. Without a single second of hesitation, she viciously slaps him across the face. She spits out with pure venom that all Derrick did was teach her precious daughter a bunch of cheap, pathetic parlor tricks. Grabbing him by the collar, she snarls that he dared to make the Grand Duke's noble daughter perform such shameful acts, before delivering another stinging slap. Her rage shows no signs of stopping, as she continues to hurl devastating insults, screeching that a lowly peasant like Derrick should at least know his place. But right at that intense moment, Grand Duke Dupin enters the room. Mariella quickly turns toward her powerful husband, fully expecting him to back her up. However, the Duke absolutely stuns her by striking her across the face instead. He coldly declares that the only one acting horribly vulgar is her. Mariella stands completely paralyzed in shock. Her own husband just struck her over a mere, worthless commoner. The Duke firmly states that while Derrick may be born of common blood, he is still the honored master who guided their daughter. His voice drops dangerously low as he asks, what kind of pathetic parent dares to treat their child's teacher with such blatant disrespect? Immediately changing his threatening demeanor, Dupin turns to Derrick with a heavy sigh. He asks the young man to forgive his wife's foolish outburst, explaining that every parent has their own, sometimes twisted, way of showing love. Taking a deep, calming breath, Derrick pushes down his anger and calmly replies that it is fine. With the tension settled, the Duke orders Derrick to follow him. They need to have a strictly dafforded private conversation, away from prying eyes in his personal audience chamber. Miriella is left completely baffled, desperately trying to process the humiliating nightmare that just unfolded. Once the heavy wooden doors finally close, inside the Duke's grand office, the atmosphere shifts. Dupin praises Derrick for his incredible achievement with Diella. He declares that such merit deserves an equally massive reward. Looking dead into his eyes, he asks if Derrick wishes to reach the absolute pinnacle of power allowed for a commoner, breaking through to become a legendary 3-star mage. A jolt of pure shock runs through Derrick. The Duke skipped all the noble pleasantries and cut straight to the core. He suddenly realizes this powerful man understands his deepest ambitions, even better than he understands them himself. After all, the Grand Duke is a terrifying 5-star mage, and a man whose presence demands absolute respect. As he stands before the Grand Duke of the nation, Derrick knows he must absolutely seize any golden opportunity that this powerful man hands to him. Without a single second of hesitation, he declares that he will gladly take that chance. Dupin once again showers him with praise for the masterful way he instructed his daughter, but bluntly points out that her current level of strength is still nowhere near formidable enough to survive the vicious snake pit of high society. Derrick respectfully replies that there are plenty of elite individuals around who are fully capable of guiding Diella, and that now that she has finally awakened to her true path, her growth will surely skyrocket beyond expectations. But Dupin fiercely disagrees, declaring that what his daughter desperately needs is not just another basic instructor, but a true, unparalleled master. The room's atmosphere shifts as Dupin whispers that he can sense a terrifying ambition lurking deep inside Derrick, a hunger so massive that it should not even be permitted for a commoner to dream of. Yet, the Duke smirks, claiming he is more than willing to turn a completely blind eye, simply because it involves, to him. Derrick's eyes widen in sheer shock as he suddenly realizes this terrifying man has absolutely no intention of stopping his climb to unprecedented heights, like reaching the legendary 4-star realm. A cold sweat drops as he perceives that this exact calculated calmness is what makes Duke Dupin an incredibly dangerous monster. The Duke then casually mentions his awareness that Derrick will not be chained to this sprawling estate for much longer. Driven by his burning ambitions, he pierces Derrick with a heavy gaze, asking if he is truly prepared to depart, and Derrick confidently answers yes. Dupin chuckles, stating that he will not stand in his way, but requests that he continue molding Diella's potential for just a little while longer. At that exact moment, he throws out a tempting bait, asking if he wishes to shatter his limits and reach the 3-star realm, the absolute highest peak ever permitted to a mere commoner. Following that intense, life-changing meeting, Derrick is granted exclusive access to the estate's grand library, where his eyes lock onto something incredible, a genuine 3-star grimoire. His breath hitches in pure awe, knowing full well that countless mages bleed their entire lives away just trying to glimpse a pathetic 2-star magic book, while he now holds the ultimate power of the stars right in his hands. Several 3-star artifacts. With this discovery, Derrick realizes that his destiny is tied to this estate for a little while longer. He has more than enough reasons to stay, even though he knows for an absolute fact that Pelline will explode with pure rage once she uncovers his secret. Later that day, Derrick crosses paths with Diella. The young girl is already swelling with pride, endlessly bragging about her new status as a 1-star mage. Derrick dryly points out the harsh truth. She only managed to cast a 1-star spell a single time by pure luck. But Diella refuses to be humbled. She throws a tantrum, screaming at him to show some pride in his own apprentice's explosive growth. Meanwhile, Derrick is completely unbothered, his eyes glued to the pages of his book. Met with his infuriatingly calm silence, Diella finally pouts and backs down. Breaking the tension, Derrick gently praises her resilience, noting how remarkably she has recovered in the past few days. He casually mentions her tearful breakdown after her crushing defeat. Immediately, Diella's tsundere instincts kick in. She stubbornly crosses her arms, desperately trying to act tough. She insists she was absolutely not crying, and that it was merely dust caught in her eyes. Furthermore, she openly admits she truly believed Derrick was going to be fired. She complains that her father should have warned her about his permanent stay at the mansion. Ignoring her attitude, Derrick smoothly shifts the focus, declaring it is time to begin today's lesson. Acknowledging her rapid evolution, he states she is ready to master new one-star spells. Diela's eyes instantly sparkle with excitement. In her mind, this is the ultimate proof. The master has finally recognized her absolute genius. Derrick honestly admits that her growth rate is completely abnormal. Reaching the one-star realm so soon after her first mana awakening is a rare feat. Hearing this, Diela's ego skyrockets to the heavens. She smugly declares that she had warned him. She is the type of prodigy who always keeps her promises. Her imagination runs wild as she starts listing off advanced spells, practically begging to learn the magic arrow technique that requires absolutely zero chanting. But while she is lost in her magical power fantasy, Derrick ruthlessly shatters her dreams. He cuts her off, delivering a cold reality check. They will be going back to basic mana manifestation. Diela freezes in absolute shock, her pride crumbling, because she truly believed. She honestly thought they were about to dive into brand new, flashy one-star spells. But Derrick quickly shuts that down. He explains that while there are plenty of reasons to rush ahead, the cold, hard truth is that the fundamental basics are absolutely everything. He is just about to launch into a long, boring lecture, but Diela completely catches him off guard. She nods gracefully, declaring that she trusts his judgment completely. She admits she just got a little too excited, foolishly dreaming of casting new magical abilities. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts in the room. She realizes Derrick is staring at her intensely, and her heart skips a beat. Trying to brush it off, she playfully asks if she has dirt on her cheek, but he just shakes his head and smirks. He murmurs that he is genuinely shocked she is actually sitting there, quietly listening to his teachings. For once, offended by his teasing, Diela puffs out her cheeks with serious attitude. She stubbornly insists that she has hung on to his every word since the very beginning. But Derrick immediately shatters her confident facade, casually bringing up that embarrassing time she dumped filthy water on him. Not once, but twice. Diela completely freezes, her jaw dropping straight to the floor. She cannot believe he is still holding onto that ridiculous grudge. Desperate to shatter the horribly awkward silence, she forces a bright, overly cheerful laugh to change the subject. Clapping her hands together, she quickly demands they get back to their magical training. And so, the grueling magic lesson drags on until the sun bleeds into the horizon. By evening, Diela is an absolute wreck, her mana and physical energy completely drained dry. Taking pity on her, Derrick finally calls for a much-needed break. He mentions a little rumor he heard around the estate, noting that her schedule is about to become a living nightmare next week. Diela lets out a heavy, soul-crushing sigh as she confirms his worst suspicions. She is being thrown into the absolute torture of high society etiquette and general education. Derrick, however, flashes a rare smile of approval. He points out that by mastering one-star magic, she has truly earned her right to a flawless, upper-class noble education. But Diela is having absolutely none of it. She aggressively complains, groaning that there is zero joy to be found, especially when memorizing utterly mind-numbing subjects like aristocratic manners, ancient foreign languages, dizzying geography, and endless history, not to mention botany, piano lessons, and even dreadful sewing classes. Staring blankly into space, she quietly wonders aloud, questioning how on earth Aceline ever managed to survive such a brutal curriculum. Derrick cannot help but agree, his tone shifting to genuine respect. He softly explains that this exact flawless dedication is why Aislinn is celebrated as the absolute flower of Duel. She stands unchallenged at the very pinnacle of high society. Hearing this, Diela just mutters that her only true desire is to master the arcane arts. Derrick casually brushes off her worries, assuring her it is entirely possible. He reminds the young lady that Lord Duel was the one who officially hired him. Because of this solid backing, they still hold absolute freedom over her magical curriculum. However, Diela remains deeply unconvinced, sensing their borrowed time is far shorter than he realizes. Raising an eyebrow, Derrick asks, if there is truly anyone bold enough to banish him from the grand estate. With a heavy sigh, Diella nods, explaining that even though the master of the house has acknowledged his strength, the matriarch is certainly not the type of woman to let sleeping dogs lie. Hearing this, a wave of genuine confusion washes over Derrick. He tilts his head, asking his worried student exactly why the noblewoman would plot his exile. Diella reveals the bitter truth. Her mother is terrified that this unorthodox tutelage will completely strip away her refined elegance, destroying her noble dignity once and for all, and ultimately twisting her into a bloodthirsty, battle-hardened mercenary. She admits that after witnessing his duel, she finally understood that true combat survival completely defies the arrogant vanity of high society. Derrick smirks, coolly stating that overcoming this hurdle is absolute child's play, a bold claim that leaves Diella utterly bewildered. He smoothly elaborates that silencing her overbearing mother is far easier than it seems. They merely need to shatter the fragile excuse she clings to for his dismissal. A short time later, the furious matriarch is seen pacing through the lavish corridors, venomously plotting and cursing Derrick as a catastrophic and corrupting influence on her precious daughter. A barrage of ridiculously horrifying mental images suddenly floods her mind, painting a nightmarish picture of Diella flashing gold teeth like a common thug, sprinting through the mud to hunt wild boars. The sheer terror of this delusion triggers a throbbing migraine, forcing her to furiously question what in the world this lowborn warrior could possibly offer. She scoffs, knowing well that her foolish husband might have embraced this Derrick, but she remains the supreme lady of this territory. Lost in her venomous scheming on what move to make next, Miria suddenly crosses paths with Diella, and the proud mother instantly anticipates that her precious daughter will sprint straight into her waiting arms, just like always. However, fate delivers a massive shock. As her eyes widen at something, a bizarre sight unfolded before her eyes. Diella was draped in a breathtaking gown, executing a flawless, aristocratic curtsy that commanded the entire room. With the grace of a true noble, she calmly explained her long absence, claiming her severe injuries had confined her to the shadows of the annex. Her voice was as smooth as silk, as she offered a polite apology for missing the opportunity to exchange proper greetings sooner. The sheer elegance of her aura sent a shockwave through the hall. Diella smiled faintly, adding that while there was much history to discuss, the keys of her morning piano lesson demanded her immediate attention. The older woman stood completely paralyzed, frozen to the floor. She stared, utterly dumbfounded by the terrifying perfection of Diella's sudden and dignified transformation. Without missing a single beat, the young lady gracefully dismissed herself, citing a fiercely demanding and rigorous academic schedule. But right before she could slip away, her mother's voice snapped like a whip. She demanded to know if Diella had secretly begun her royal etiquette training, considering those elite classes were not scheduled until the following week. With a mysterious, knowing glint in her eyes, Diella smoothly replied that her intense preparation was already well underway. Her mother was left utterly speechless and deeply suspicious. How on earth did this previously clumsy girl master such flawless high society manners without a single formal instructor to guide her? Wrapping up the tense exchange, Diella offered a picture-perfect farewell. And to add to the sheer bewilderment of the moment, she actually offered a warm, compassionate smile to a passing maid, telling her to prioritize her health. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the grand hallway. Every single person present, especially her bewildered mother, was left staring at her retreating back in absolute shock, unable to comprehend the total rebirth of this young woman. Meanwhile, miles away, Aislinn sat sipping premium tea with her aristocratic inner circle. In the elite, golden district of Evelstein, her high society friends gossiped, noting that during their last elegant gathering, a dark cloud of anxiety had seemingly hung over her head. But now, she looked absolutely radiant. Aislinn blinked, her eyes widening in perfect innocence, before offering a sweet, apologetic smile for causing her dear friends any unnecessary distress. With the gentle, soothing aura of a true saint, she reassured her devoted circle that her troubling burdens had miraculously vanished overnight, leaving her heart completely at peace. Her loyal, crimson-haired companion, the noble Alphalwine Belmere, let out a dramatic sigh of immense relief at those words. Her heart had nearly stopped when terrifying rumors spread that Aislinn had recklessly abandoned the safety of the noble sector just to play the hero and dive into danger. Overflowing with sweet gratitude for their unwavering loyalty, Aislinn softly revealed that the one who desperately needed help, was her younger sister, Diella, who was in dire need of a magic instructor. Because of this, she had to step out of her noble world and seek one out personally. When Alenta hears this revelation, she is absolutely stunned. She cannot fathom that the prestigious Aislinn would personally go out to recruit a mere magic tutor, which only proves that this teacher must be an absolute powerhouse. Their other friend, Denise Veltus Linear, chimes in to confirm the rumor. Aislinn then shares that she recently saw Diella, and the girl had changed so drastically that she was almost unrecognizable. She beams with immense pride, declaring that her sister awakened as a one-star mage. Her newfound posture was so breathtakingly elegant and serene that it even made Aislinn feel completely overshadowed. Meanwhile, Denise is absolutely shocked to hear Aislinn praise her sister so openly, considering their noble family had always kept Miria hidden away in the shadows. Denise points out that this miraculous transformation must be all thanks to this brilliant magic teacher, and Aislinn fiercely nods in agreement. She admits the tutor might lack noble status, but his raw talent is simply overwhelming. That was exactly why it was worth traveling all the way to the gritty Beyond Mercenary Corps just to recruit him in person. Alente is hit with another wave of shock, realizing this supposed master is actually a rough mercenary. But honestly, what completely captures her curiosity is the undeniable fact that this mysterious man managed to turn the rebellious Miria into a perfectly poised young lady who even broke through to become a verified one-star mage. Burning with intrigue, she leans in and asks Aislinn to reveal the true identity of this legendary magic teacher. Aislinn hesitates for a fleeting moment, but Alente argues that the man is destined for massive fame as Diella's master anyway, and she simply wants to know his name before the whole world does. Finally giving in, Aislinn drops the bombshell that the man who completely reshaped her sister's destiny goes by the name of Derrick. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Estate, Diella is having a heart-to-heart with her mother, explaining how Derrick has been secretly teaching her high society etiquette. She adds, Diella casually mentioned how grueling it was to study etiquette alone, but instead of acknowledging the massive impact Derrick had made, Miria completely brushed him off, saying it was wonderful to see her daughter studying so diligently on her own. But Diella was not about to back down. She smoothly corrected her mother, boldly declaring that her progress was entirely thanks to Derrick's brilliant guidance. Even then, the stubborn matriarch kept refusing to give him any credit. With a tight jaw, she demanded to know what Derrick was supposedly so incredibly difficult about learning a few manners alone. Diella calmly replied that it had been a complete nightmare at first, but everything simply clicked into place thanks to Derrick. Deep down, Miria was absolutely boiling with rage. She was ready to explode, because from the very second this conversation started, I've been forced to hear Derrick's name over and over again. Every mention just fueled the blazing fire of her desire to kick him out of the estate completely. Still, she desperately needed to find a loophole, some clever way to twist this infuriating situation back in her favor. Suddenly, the mansion's servants chimed in, showering Diella with endless praise, noting that she had become remarkably kind and perfectly mannered. Even the head gardener happily pointed out that the young lady had been in unbelievably high spirits, undergoing a miraculous transformation in just a few short weeks. And as if that was not frustrating enough for Miria, Dellen boldly stepped up, claiming that Diella was like a completely different person now. He even admitted that sometimes he actually mistook her for the flawless Lady Aislinn. He truly believed that the once troubled girl was finally on the verge of blooming into a true, elegant, noble woman. Upon hearing this chorus of absolute adoration, Miria nearly lost her mind entirely. Her hands trembled, realizing there was not a single flaw she could exploit to drag Derrick down. Sometime later, the scene shifts to Derrick, intensely focusing as he trained his magical aura. But he was clearly hitting a frustrating wall right as Rick suddenly approached. Rick immediately apologized for interrupting such a serious training session, but Derrick simply waved it off, assuring him it was no trouble at all. He then curiously asked what exactly brought the man out here, and Rick explained that he urgently needed to discuss Diela's progress. However, before he could speak another word, his eyes locked onto the table. Incredibly rare 3-star magic grimoire resting firmly in Derrick's hands. Catching his stunned gaze, Derrick casually explained that Duel was the one who graciously lent him the ancient text, a revelation that left Rick completely paralyzed with absolute shock. Unfazed, Derrick calmly murmured that mastering this level of power was quite the challenge for him, but he figures there is no harm in preparing ahead of time. Hearing those words, Rick finally grasps what his father meant when he declared that Derrick is a true master. Completely lost for words, he awkwardly offers some praise and shifts the topic. Derrick doesn't let it go, circling back to what he wanted to discuss about Diela. Instantly, Rick's face flushes a deep crimson. He stammers that it is a bit complicated, but desperately asks if Derrick understands the mysterious minds of teenage girls. He nervously wonders if Diela would be thrilled if he crafted her a handmade doll. Instantly, Derrick is hit with a traumatic flashback of Valerian's cursed, terrifying creation, and without a single second of hesitation, he declares that making a doll is absolutely out of the question. Rick accepts this with a heavy sigh, muttering that he also had his doubts about that terrible idea. Thoroughly frustrated, he grabs his hair, stands up, and suggests they head back inside the estate, seeing as Derrick has finally wrapped up his intense training session. As they walk back down the path, Rick turns to Derrick, his voice softening as he expresses his deep gratitude. He admits that the heavy atmosphere within the household has completely shifted as of late. He notes that Valerian has entirely poured his focus into managing their vast territory, and even though their stern father hides his emotions well, he actually seems quite pleased with the progress. Derrick is genuinely taken aback by this revelation, finding it incredibly difficult to read the cold, stoic expressions of Lord Dupine. Rick then opens his heart, confessing that he is finally trying to embrace a truth he once fiercely denied: the fact that people can truly evolve. He ponders out loud if he was just too slow to notice, or if he was simply running away from reality. But now, stepping out of the shadows, he too is ready to transform himself, inspired by how much Diela has grown. With raw sincerity in his eyes, Rick thanks Derrick for guiding them. Changing the heavy mood, he casually mentions that he noticed something odd, that Diela's magic felt entirely different. Derrick is completely caught off guard that he managed to sense it. Rick goes on to explain that the aura felt like, through the air, as if painting an invisible masterpiece using pure, flowing magic. Hearing this vivid, magical breakdown, Derrick's eyes widen with absolute, undeniable realization. Rick possesses a monstrous talent. He is a true genius, just like everyone born with the legendary Duel family bloodline. Derrick then drops a massive, game-changing revelation. Diela is naturally weaving her aura using the ancient wild nature arts. It is a legendary mana technique that Rick has already heard fearful whispers about. Derrick breaks down the core, unbreakable laws of magic. Every single mage channels their internal energy differently. He truly believes that once Diela shatters her current limits, she will be able to conquer the skies entirely on her own. He drops a bitter, heavy truth, admitting that if he stays by her side, he might actually become the very obstacle holding her true potential back. Rick processes this emotional burden in complete silence. He nods in deep understanding, fully believing in his heart that Diela's golden moment to shine is fast approaching. Fast forward 2 peaceful months later. Diela looks absolutely radiant. A sweet maid gently styles her hair, carefully preparing to weave vibrant, gorgeous spring blooms into her locks. She delicately holds a single petal, breathing in the sweet, calming scent. Her magical confidence has completely leveled up. She now casts one-star spells with absolute, effortless grace. The once cold mansion staff now feel like a warm family. She reflects on the painful, tragic days of her past, all the devastating losses she was forced to endure. But everything completely changed thanks to Derrick's light. The maid smiles warmly at her beautiful young miss, pointing out the radiant, unshakable joy in her eyes today. Asking if her magical training has her this fired up, Diella blushes brightly, caught completely off guard. Is her racing, fluttering heart really that obvious to everyone? She shyly asks the kind maid to spare just one perfect, leftover bloom from her lovely floral arrangement. A sweet, innocent gift meant only for her master, Derrick. But on that exact same day, her perfect paradise shatters. The delicate flower slips from her trembling, frozen fingers. As Derrick drops a soul-crushing bombshell, he is leaving because there is nothing truly left to teach them. He reveals the profound philosophy behind the ever-turning cycle of the seasons. In this world, there is absolutely no endless, bone-chilling winter, nor is there a radiant spring that lasts forever. Sometime later, the scene shifts as Derrick suddenly finds himself. He sat down with Lord Dupin to break down the heavy situation. He revealed that Diella's magical core was bound to the school of savage nature, an ancient truth he suspected. The Lord already knew in his heart. Derrick stated firmly that if he continued to meddle in her magical awakening, he would only end up shackling her boundless potential. Lord Dupin weighed every single word. The mercenary spoke, letting the reality sink in, as this simply meant there was no longer a single reason for him to linger around the grand estate. Derrick gave a solemn nod, confirming the bitter truth. Dupin took a deep, shaky breath, slowly, rising from his seat and pacing over to the window, murmuring how drastically the winds of fate had shifted. He openly confessed that thanks to Derrick's guidance, his precious daughter had blossomed into true strength. He admitted his own failures as a father, always buried in the endless mountains of paperwork, managing the vast territory. But looking at her now, a profound wave of relief washed over his soul. The Lord then asked exactly when Derrick planned to make his departure, and the mercenary calmly replied that he caught wind of Lady Azeline visiting the manor very soon, making it the perfect opportunity to journey back to the city of Evelstein right alongside her when she departed. Hearing this timeline, the Lord's tone shifted, reminding him that the master key to the Grand Library must be returned. Derrick smoothly replied that he would hand it over along with the ancient grimoires he was currently studying. He offered to pass the artifact to Dawn later, but the Lord cut him off, his voice hardening like steel, declaring there was no need for delays, demanding he surrender the key right then and there. With the heavy conversation reaching its bitter end, the Lord dismissed Derrick with a cold wave of his hand. Processing the shifting tides of his fate, the mercenary offered one last, respectful bow to bid the noble farewell. But the moment he stepped out of the study, he was ambushed by Diella, her eyes blazing with absolute fury over his sudden departure. Derrick let out a sigh, explaining there was no escaping this destiny, fully aware that his words probably wouldn't extinguish the blazing fire in her stubborn heart. With a trembling voice, she practically begged him to stay. Derrick froze for a split second, then gently closed the distance between them, reminding her that beneath it all, he was just a wandering mercenary, destined to return to the blood and grit of his everyday life. He gave her a reassuring look, promising that he would also continue walking the endless path of magic. And once Diella truly masters her awakened abilities, she will travel to the grand capital of Evelstein for her dazzling debut into high society. Derrick offers a gentle, reassuring smile to soothe her, promising that their destinies are bound to cross again. He even teases that he would gladly teach her advanced techniques, but only if she manages to level up her power. Pouting playfully, Diella calls him incredibly frustrating, simply because he always knows exactly what to say to melt her emotional walls, leaving her completely speechless. However, the peace does not last long. That very night, a terrifying nightmare drags Diella back to the agonizing horrors of her past life. She bolts upright in bed, screaming in pure terror. Drenched in cold sweat, her racing heart finally calms, washed in overwhelming relief that it was merely a dream. Hearing The sudden cry, a startled maid rushes into the room, frantically asking if her young lady is unharmed. In that fragile second, a dark temptation whispers in Diela's mind. She considers faking an elaborate crisis, or even striking the poor maid, just like the cruel villainess she used to be. Surely, causing a massive, violent scene would force Derrick to cancel his departure and stay. But as the shadow of her former self lingers, the trembling maid asks again. Shattering those toxic thoughts, Diela makes a profound, mature choice. She refuses to regress into that heartless monster. Flashing a gentle smile, she assures the maid everything is fine. She knows that clinging to him through cruel tantrums will never make her the noble soul she strives to become. Morning arrives, bringing the inevitable moment of farewell. As Aileen readies the grand carriage for departure, she gently nudges Derrick to bid his precious student a final goodbye before they set off on their journey. Turning around, Derrick is greeted by a heartwarming sight. Diela and her loyal brothers have gathered for a proper send-off. Valerian steps forward, reluctance in his eyes, asking if he truly must leave. Derrick gives a firm nod, stating he must return to his rightful place. Breaking the heavy silence, Ray chimes in with a knowing smirk, acknowledging that surviving the mansion's grueling demands was no easy feat, considering his relentless hard work. With unwavering sincerity, Valerian then makes a vow. He declares that if Derrick ever faces a crisis, he only needs to ask. The family will move mountains to aid him without hesitation. Touched by this unbreakable bond, Derrick then, his gaze falls upon Diela, whose stubborn silence screams how unready she is for this goodbye. But as the heavy tension lingers in the air, she finally breaks under Derrick's unwavering stare. Masking her pain, she scoffs, asking if he honestly thought she would drop to her knees and beg him to stay. "I am no longer a child," she insists. Derrick smiles softly. "It was the greatest honor teaching you," he replies, his voice tinged with a deep, lingering regret. "Though I cannot proudly stand as your master anymore, I pray you never forget the magic we shared." Diela, fiercely fighting back tears, immediately corrects him. "I will proudly shout to the heavens that you are my master," she declares, "which means your days of hiding in the shadows and living a quiet, peaceful life are officially over. After all, you are the master of the great Diela Dupline." Turning her back to hide her trembling lips, she mutters, "Just please take care of yourself out there, and do not go throwing your life away on foolish dangers." Derrick's eyes soften. "I will survive," he promises. "Just swear you will not push yourself to the breaking point either." "I told you. I am a grown woman now," she bites back. "I know exactly how to survive on my own." Those defensive words strike Derrick like a lightning bolt, echoing a bittersweet ghost from his past. He remembers saying the exact same thing to Katia, who had responded by pulling him into a desperate embrace, begging him to listen. Now, standing on the other side of that painful mirror, Derrick slowly closes the distance between them. He reaches out, gently resting his hand on her head with overwhelming warmth. "You do not need to force yourself to grow up so fast," he whispers tenderly. Those gentle words utterly shatter her emotional armor, and Diela breaks down into heart-wrenching sobs. As the tragic moment comes for Derrick to finally walk away, she calls out his name through her tears for a proper farewell, praying to the stars that their destinies will cross again. With absolute grace, Derrick bows deeply before his student. "May fate reunite us in the grand city of Evelstein," he vows. Time flows on, and Derrick eventually sets foot into the bustling commercial district of Evelstein. Pushing open the heavy tavern doors, he is immediately greeted by the chaotic, familiar energy of his mercenary guild. Right in the center, Pelline is brutally beating a grown man to a pulp, but she instantly freezes the second her eyes lock onto Derrick's familiar face. A warm smile spreads across his lips as he steps forward, saying, Derrick finally returned to his humble home. After he settled in, Jiden poured him a glass of expensive wine, the kind usually reserved for high-ranking nobles, declaring it a lavish welcome-back gift. Derrick gratefully accepted the cup. Pelline, on the other hand, squinted at him and asked if he was always this deathly pale. Noting that he looked absolutely drained after surviving his time at the prestigious Dupley estate. She demanded to know what dark secrets occurred in that mansion, but Derrick brushed it off, claiming nothing. A special happened during his employment. Pelline immediately used that to provoke him, teasing that he was putting on arrogant noble airs now. But Jaiden quickly intervened, sliding a drink over to cool the rising tension. Pelline then grumbled, complaining bitterly about how exhausting it was to work, all by herself, while Derrick was away. Jaiden cleverly changed the subject, pointing out that Derrick likely brought back a massive fortune from such an elite job. When asked if the payout was worth it, Derrick smiled and said he gained something far more valuable than mere gold coins. He revealed the mystical grimoire he had received, leaving his two companions staring in absolute disbelief. At first, they assumed it was a rare 2-star magic tome, but Derrick casually corrected them. It was a legendary 3-star grimoire. The two of them absolutely lost their minds, screaming and demanding to know who he stole it from. They panicked, swearing he was a dead man if caught, but Derrick calmly clarified that Lord Dupley himself had gifted him the artifact. Pelline was completely paralyzed with shock. Hearing this, desperately grabbing Derrick and asking if the noble estate was currently looking for a master archery instructor. After all, the chaotic uproar finally settled down, and Pelline fell, fast asleep like she always did. Derrick turned to Jaiden and asked if there were any mercenary quests available on the board. Jaiden was completely dumbfounded, as the boy had just returned home and already craved more action. Derrick declared his absolute readiness to take on any mission, even something as basic as a monster subjugation quest. He muttered that he was terrified of losing his lethal combat edge, but Jaiden scoffed at that idea, knowing full well his true power. Jaiden shook his head. He knew Derrick was not the kind of mage who would ever let his skills rust away into nothing. He confessed that the guild was always desperately short on battle mages, and if Derrick was truly hungry for bloodshed and coin, there was a mountain of subjugation quests waiting for him. Without missing a beat, Derrick coldly declared he would depart at dawn. As the sun rose the next day, Derrick and Pelline marched straight into the heart of the monster territories. The hunt had begun. On the battlefield, the two of them moved in flawless, deadly harmony. Standing back to back, they became an impenetrable fortress of steel and magic, leaving absolutely zero blind spots for the beasts to exploit. They carved a path of destruction across multiple zones, annihilating every single monster foolish enough to cross their path. But the grind did not stop when the sun went down. Under the moonlight, Derrick ruthlessly pushed his mana to break into the 3-star realm. Yet, the bottleneck was incredibly stubborn. The mana rebelled against him. A massive backlash surged through his veins, triggering a violent explosion that left his hands scorched and trembling with agony. He gritted his teeth. His 2-star spells were already mastered to perfection, but the wall blocking the path to becoming a 3-star mage felt like an impossibly high mountain waiting to be conquered. Seasons changed, but their relentless slaughter did not. From the blazing summer, Derrick and Pelline spent every waking moment bathed in monster blood, clearing subjugation quests until the merciless winter froze the lands. When the blizzard finally drove them back to civilization, they pushed open the tavern doors. Jaiden could only stare in pure awe, showering them with praise for their monstrous stamina and undeniable strength. He chuckled, muttering that only the fiery blood of youth could survive the hellish trek to the Kent Mountains in such a brutal, freezing climate. In fact, he called them absolute madmen. Who else would be crazy enough to haul a severed harpy head through a deadly blizzard? Pelline took a deep breath of the warm tavern air, a fierce smile on her face. For the first time, she declared, she finally understood what it meant to truly feel alive. Seeing their battle-hardened states, Jaiden immediately ordered them to take a well-deserved day of rest tomorrow. But before they could relax, he dropped a very interesting piece of bait. A brand new request had just hit the board, tailor-made for Derrick's unique talents. Derrick's eyes sharpened like a hawk. He demanded to know the details. Jaiden smirked, explaining that it was an incredibly high-paying mission, but suspiciously easy for the amount of gold being offered. The plot thickened as the identity of the client was revealed. The request was officially issued by the notorious Royal Mercenary Corps, stationed in the West District, acting under the direct orders of the powerful Count Belmere himself. And rumor had it They were desperately searching for a certain. They dragged a lowly commoner into a magical duel. But let's be totally honest here. They just wanted a live punching bag. Jaiden pats Derrick on the back and explains the job. All he has to do is endure a few magical blasts, survive the beating, and the mission is done. Easy money, right? The very next day, Derrick steps into the grand magical combat arena, located deep within the luxurious noble district. Meanwhile, a talented noble student named Auntie asks her professor about her upcoming opponent. The instructor smirks, revealing they hired a mere commoner. Auntie freezes in sheer disbelief. Why would she waste her mana on a peasant? But her professor insists this is a crucial step in her combat training. He proudly assures her that the commoner was paid a massive fortune, meaning she can unleash her absolute full power. Despite his words, a heavy knot of guilt twists in Auntie's stomach. Seeing her hesitation, the arrogant professor tries to calm her nerves. He claims their target can handle one-star magic, but that doesn't help at all. Auntie knows her own strength. She is right on the verge of breaking through to the 2-star rank. And in this world, the power gap between a 1-star and a 2-star mage is as vast as the heavens and the mortal earth. Moments later, Auntie finally comes face to face with Derrick, the boy destined to be her victim. He bows and introduces himself with perfect manners. But the second the name Derrick leaves his lips, a strange wave of familiarity washes over her. Where has she heard that name before? After the awkward introductions, Auntie's arrogant professor orders them to step onto the battlefield. Yet, the teacher secretly scoffs, doubting this kid even has a single drop of mana. He looks way too weak. As they step onto the arena floor, Auntie turns and asks Derrick if he knows the sacred rules of a magical duel. He calmly nods his head, breathing a sigh of relief. The noble girl begs him to defend himself with everything he has. She promises to end the battle in a single strike, sparing him from endless pain. But deep down, she is absolutely terrified that Derrick might actually die. He risks tearing his own body apart if he pushes past his absolute limits. Unfazed, Derrick demands to know exactly how much endurance she expects from his mortal soul. The mysterious entity bristles at the question, scoffing at his sheer audacity. Holding his ground, Derrick explains that he must measure the exact threshold of his pain so he can become the perfect shield for her cause. Stunned by his unwavering resolve, her irritation melts into an amused smirk. She playfully teases his ridiculously formal way of speaking before laying down the ultimate challenge. Survive with everything you possess. Those words ignite a blazing fire within Derrick. He immediately centers his aura, slipping into pure concentration, and vows to the mysterious being that her absolute command will be flawlessly executed. Let the awakening begin.